necrotic, people were playing dwarf, but you can't play dwarf in this dungeon on your tank because you just really need the Shadow Meld. We've seen one Western team, I believe it was Abracadabra, actually played a dwarf in this dungeon, but they had to have the tank die over and over and over whenever they did a skip and need to rest him back up, and it just costs you so much time.
Yeah, it ends up costing you probably somewhere in the range of like close to a minute, just because how much time you end up just losing just from the deaths and how long it takes to mass res and just getting in position and everything else. Buff War Nerf Rogue, Tomboy Uwu ends up proccing his cheat death there. I don't actually know what he ended up getting hit by that ends up proccing it. That was okay, so he didn't have his tricks of the trade, I guess, and he ends up getting meleeed by something. Black Mamba here getting their pull a little bit quicker here. They end up popping their Bloodlust maybe a little bit preemptively, whereas Buff War Nerf Rogue here kiting this Raging Templar as Ching is just backpedaling away from it.
Yeah, a little bit of a smaller pool here from both of those teams coming out compared to Battle for Champ yesterday. But Battle for Champ did this very huge pool at the start and then wiped to it while also committing their Bloodlust. So just smaller pools from both those teams, just safer pools. And I like to see it, to be honest, because those super difficult pulls, especially with those affixes, they can just spell disaster, and even very good teams like Battle for Champ fail to it. So I think it's better for them to just have it a little bit safer and smaller, just to make sure they don't have those huge mess-ups.
Yeah, Black Mamba here electing to use their Shroud, and they're looking like they're making their way towards AccuSeer's room. This is one of the reasons that they ended up wiping on AccuSeer yesterday, just because they did have more Reaping than you'd normally end up wanting in on AccuSeer, while you did have some of the trash available to them. Wong ended up, I think, going down just to Necrotic stacks and other reasons with that Reaping procced on top of AccuSeer. So this is definitely going to be something to watch when they do end up getting the Reaping. Buff War Nerf Rogue electing to kill a little bit more trash in this front part of the instance. They're going to get an easy Shadow Meld on a lot of it because it's going to be so far away from them. Ching jumping out here, trying to get a reset on his Necrotic stacks while these mobs are going to be looking to enrage in a second. Black Mamba dropping incredibly low here.
Yeah, everyone is dropping low. All of them have Necrotic stacks, all of them have aggro for some of those smaller mobs, and they pulled a Living Current, if I'm not wrong. Okay, no, they didn't pull a Living Current, thankfully. Because that would have been a while for sure. But yeah, they managed to somehow recover. They all managed to get rid of the Necrotic stacks. The healer managed to get them back up to safety, so they should be fine to finish off this trash pack. But the tank also proccing that... so they pulled the minibus. Yeah, so they somehow managed to pull the minibus through the wall here, which does happen with some of the AoE mechanics that are going off. So Wong actually going down as he does not have the cheat dash trinket available. This is a disaster for them. They actually just somehow managed to pull this minibus through the wall, and this either they have to Shadow Meld off aggro and get a rest up, or they have to just have a full team wipe going in, because killing this minibus here without the tank available to you is just going to take them too long.
This is going so Wong. Buff War Nerf Rogue here. Ching is electing to kite a bunch of these Spiritualists and these attendants as they do end up casting that blast cast on him, this water blast here. That would actually do a ton of damage to him, especially if they are enraged. These Spiritualists as well do have that Mending Rapids cast, which will end up healing all the mobs to full over a period of time. It does an initial heal, and then it does like a hot on the whole entire group, so that could actually be very dangerous. So making sure that they do end up getting those kicked is important. Buff War Nerf Rogue popping their Lightfoot potions, running all the way in AccuSeer's room. Ching getting so low there. Black Mamba making their way back to AccuSeer's room, but just that major blunder there with pulling Windspeaker Heldus is just going to be so costly for them.
Yeah, and Black Mamba not getting the 20% Reaping either, while Buff War Nerf Rogue already procced that wave. Now Black Mamba has this really weird pathing where they just barely do any trash. Sorry?
They're going to deal with the whole Reaping. So.
Yeah, they don't have Shadow Meld available to them because they used it right as they released it, have to deal with the whole Reaping wave. This Reaping wave is a very dangerous wave because there's just so many casters inside, so you definitely want to make sure that you interrupt as much as possible, and you want to get those AoE stuns out and AoE like Ring of Keys, things like that, because those Grave Bolts, they just go off on random targets and do so much damage because there's just so many of them. And they're fighting with the boss at the same time, and it really seems like those ads are not very stacked at all, so meaning you can't hit them all with your AoE stuns, so they're gonna have to deal with them as fast as possible before they die to them.
Yeah, the reason for that being is that those attendants and the Spiritualists end up turning into those Tormented Souls, and of course there are a ton of those in the first half of the instance, so that's the reason that you do end up getting those Grave Bolt casters. Buff War Nerf Rogue here has popped their Bloodlust on AccuSeer here, so they were just really patient with it. They pulled a 50% health Templar into AccuSeer here, so making sure that Ching does in fact get resets on his Necrotic at some point is important here. As AccuSeer does end up having just a little bit of downtime just in terms of how he ends up queuing his spells. So Ching, if he does end up cutting away from that Spiritualist, will end up getting a reset, as you do actually see him getting right there as that Templar was casting something.
Yeah, Black Mamba still only on that 20% trash. Now, we've seen them yesterday pull some of the trash on top of the bus later on, but still, compared to Battle for Champion yesterday, they just had such a weird pathing, and they didn't really do a lot of trash at all in this first bus area, meaning they would have to do a lot more trash later on. They also did this, like, 5 Enforcer pull, which is something we didn't really like watching from Abracadabra as well, as Buff Warrior Nerd Rogue is on their way to push the boss to 50%.
Looks like Black Mamba's having that Aqualing casting that Sea Blast over and over again. So basically, if you don't have threat on that Aqualing, it'll end up starting to spam cast that Sea Blast. And it's actually just going off again. This is actually very dangerous for the group, as it does end up getting cast on random people. You actually see Hanks getting both of the Undertows while getting the Sea Blast cast on him, and that Aqualing is just casting it over and over again. This is not super great for Black Mamba. Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue here is dealing with the Aqualings as well. They're just making sure to dodge out of the way of the Surging Rush, though.
Yeah, Ching actually getting hit by the Surging Rush. Thankfully, he did not fall off the platform. He did proc his cheat Death Trinket here, but yeah, he'll just kind of leap through, got hit by one of the Surging Rush, dropping very low. They did manage to recover here. They also have one Battle Rest available, so they can have one death, as long as it's not the Rasta Druid. But Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue definitely a little bit behind on boss damage here, but they have 10% more trash, and they also have the Apprentices on top of the boss here, so they, in theory, are not behind.
Yeah, they actually have a lot more of percent of count that they're going to be able to get here, as opposed to Black Mamba. Black Mamba electing to skip a lot of the front half of the instance trash, and then they ended up proccing the Reaping there with just some of the back half stuff, while Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue is probably going to be at about 32-ish% on their count whenever they do end up killing Accuseer. So you actually did see Loda there off to the side. He ended up body pulling those Initiates that are next to Windspeaker Heldis. If you actually end up body pulling them correctly, you won't actually be able to, you actually will not pull that mini boss, so you're actually able to get 4 count over the, you'll end up getting 4 count just from these 4 Initiates here. So this is actually very good from them in order to be able to just get a couple extra percent that they otherwise would not be able to have access to. Black Mamba here making their way towards that bridge skip that we have talked about so much. They're going to be looking to proc their 40% Reaping before they do end up using their Shadow Meld to jump that skip, though.
Yeah, so Black Mamba, of course, as you mentioned, just having so much less trash percentage compared to Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue. They did down the boss earlier, so they have to deal with this rest of the trash pack that they're doing right now, but this amount of trash is not going to proc their 40% Reaping wave, so they will have to use another trash pull right after this before they can do the skip. While Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue, once they dealt with this Reaping wave, once they dealt with this trash mob that they're pulling right now, they're going to be on 40% or higher, and they can do the skip. So Black Mamba is still just kind of behind as they're finishing off this last Iron Hull, and just now are reaching 30% trash percentage.
I wonder where they're going to get a bunch of their count from. It's definitely going to be interesting here. I know they're going to probably end up pulling that pack that's inside that room with that the room with the Rune Carver, but the likelihood of them pulling that Rune Carver pack is so low just because that mob is so dangerous, where Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue is actually not going to have a lot of issues looking to get their count. Tomboy drops incredibly low, though, but it should be okay as he's getting topped up by Loda here.
Yeah, Ching just kiting back out and then back in again, so just a lot of kiting going on here just because of those casters that are very dangerous with the Water Blast, of course, and Raging as well. As all the mobs drop low, they go into Raging, and the tank having all those necrotic stacks, very hard for them to deal with. That's why we see a lot of kiting going on. And now we see the 40% proc. We see Ching just making sure he has aggro from all of those mobs, waiting until his team is through, then line of sight and use the Shadow Meld, making sure that he drops all the aggro.
Beautiful from Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue. Like you said, they ended up doing that skip grade. I think Blue went down on the side of Black Mamba, so just more mistakes. They ended up electing to use their Battle Res there in order to be able to get him up, as Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue is pulling some of the Initiates into the pack here off to the side, where Black Mamba is electing to use their Shroud, so they can pull this Iron Hull Apprentice pack right in front of the Elementals. So this is interesting.
Yeah, it's just slower, really, because Black Mamba has had to do more pulls to get the same amount than Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue with less pulls. So just the fact that they were slower or pulled less at the very start of the instance just means they have to do more pulls here in this trash area to get their 40%. So just a slower route and a safer route really coming out of Black Mamba here. And we don't really see them adjusting their strategy here at all compared to yesterday, where they played the exact same strategy. And that's something I don't really like seeing, because yesterday they lost this dungeon already, and it was pretty obvious that their route was slower. So I would have liked to see them actually practicing their strategy, or maybe even changing it up to get a different strategy for today. But nothing changed for Black Mamba, as Buff Warrior Rogue is pretty ahead at this point, already dealing with their trash here.
Yeah, another issue with the strategy is you actually do get about 4 of those reaping mobs pulled with you whenever you do end up doing that bridge skip. So it is a fine strategy, but like you said, it's just so much slower than the strategy from Buff Warrior Rogue, just because of how you're able to get your count towards the very beginning of the dungeon. You're able to skip a lot of those attendants and spiritualists, so you're able to just save your tank a little bit of damage taken and reduce his chance of dying, but it's just such a slower strategy. We actually do see Buff Warrior Rogue here trying to clear out this area around Gilcaller Fae and Brother Ironhole. So we wanted them to pull some of the trash into Brother Ironhole whenever they do end up downing Gilcaller Fae, but they are electing to just kind of clear out all the trash here. So it's definitely an interesting strategy here, as you do see Ching end up running away from the mobs here, trying to make sure that he doesn't end up having too many necrotic stacks, because too many necrotic stacks are actually be super dangerous. You did see one of those initiates fleeing off towards the bridge area, but you did see Ching end up charging it, rooting it, and that ends up canceling their fleeing mechanic whenever they do get low.
Yeah, so Buff Warrior Rogue dealt with all the trash here. They're on 58% trash. This is exactly the amount of trash they want to be on, because as soon as they kill one more of those enforcers that they can pull on the boss later on, they are able to proc the 60% Reaping Wave and do the Shadow Mail skip afterwards. But first of all, they have to deal with Galecaller Fae here, as it is the caster mob that is pretty dangerous if you don't get the right interrupts through. The Slicing Tempest that needs to be interrupted. If it's not, then there will be a AoE damage on the whole group, also leaving a dot behind. Now, one thing to note here is that this zone here on the ground removes all of the damage over time effects, so it actually also removes necrotic. So the tank can go into this zone when he goes high on necrotic stacks and just get rid of them.
Yeah, but it will also remove Loda's dots, and what's really worth more, the tank having necrotic?
He can step himself in without having the bosses.
I meant the Loda's dots on Brother Ironhole and Galecaller Fae. And what's more important, the Resto Druid DPS or the tank resetting necrotic here? Black Mamba positioning themselves close to Galecaller Fae and Brother Ironhole as well, but they are just so far behind with the 6 death differential. Buff Warrior Rogue here just playing it. They're playing this back half of the instance just a little bit safer than Black Mamba, taking it a little bit slower, but they're just so far ahead that it's going to be very challenging for Black Mamba to catch back up.
And you can actually see how much damage one of those tornadoes does to the people, as Lazarus almost got one-shot by getting hit by one of those tornadoes. Now, the only way those tornadoes spawn, as one of the rogues got hit as well, is by interrupting Gilcaller Fae once she has the buff up. In theory, he can just choose to not interrupt her while she has the buff up, so none of those tornadoes spawn, which we've seen from some of the Western teams before. But you can also see Loda here in the back on his way to pull this last enforcer that they need, because Gilcaller Fae is down now, and Brother Ironhole by itself is really not dangerous at all.
Yeah, they do need to be kind of careful about when they end up proccing their Reaping, though, relative to whenever Brother Ironhole is dying, because they don't want to end up having to like face tank the Reaping for a little bit while Brother Ironhole is still about 5-ish% health. So they need to just be kind of aware of when that Enforcer does end up dying here. If that's what we assume that Loda ended up pulling that Enforcer off to the side that is in that patrol there for a second. Black Mamba here going to be down in Galecaller Fae in just a couple more seconds. We're on the side of Buff Warrior Rogue. Brother Ironhole is about 15-ish%, so should be dying as well in just a couple seconds. You actually see Loda pretty far off screen there, just messing around in bear form, trying to get that Enforcer into the correct part of his patrol before pulling him, because if you do end up pulling him at a bad time, you'll end up proximity aggroing a lot of the other trash, which would end up either killing Loda or wiping the whole entire group, kind of depending.
Yeah, that was actually not very well done by Loda here in general, because as you said, this enforces a patrol and he walks around all the time, and the only time you can pull him is when he's in between 2 trash groups, and that happens only once every 30 seconds or once every minute or so. So what Loda should have done was go there before, make sure the mob is rooted on in between those 2 mobs. Trash packs rather, and then pull it. But because he was in a bad spot when Loda went there to get it, he needed to wait all the way until Brother Ironhole was dead, and then it was not very efficient anymore because they had to kill the Enforcer all by itself. Well, Black Mamba is on the way to kill Ironhole as well, but Wong actually dropping very low.
Yeah, and you do see Buff Warrior Rogue killing those Dredge Sailors there, and then electing to run past, not dealing with that Ritualist at all, just making sure that they get the Shadow Melt off, getting out of combat with all the Reaping as Ching is mounting up here on his woolly white Rhino. Great mount, and they're gearing up to pull these Ayaya tentacles, while Black Mamba here going to be downing Brother Ironhole in just a couple seconds.
Yeah, so Black Mamba also chose to use their Bloodlust here earlier, while Buff Warrior Rogue just now gets their Bloodlust back up, and we see one of the rogues actually dropping very low as the tentacle spawns. I'm pretty sure he had aggro as soon as they spawn. You gotta be very careful, because those tentacles, they just spawn and immediately melee hit somebody. So the Rogue was unfortunately in the wrong position here and got hit. Thankfully, nothing happened to him. But yeah, one more thing to note about the Bloodlust is the Black Mamba, either they're planning on having such a slow dungeon that they get it up again at the very end, or they just think they don't need it for the last boss, which would be very interesting because almost all the teams had to use their Bloodlust for the last boss to only get one intermission phase.
Yeah, Ching, of course, you actually do see on your screen he has 30 stacks of that necrotic because you do end up having to face tank those tentacles for the full duration. Otherwise, they will end up doing a ton of damage to your whole entire group as they'll end up like smashing, doing a massive amount of AoE. Black Mamba here shrouding past the tentacle pack, and they're looking like they're going to pull this Deathbringer cultist pack together, maybe merging it into one pull as opposed to doing it into two separate pulls like we do see on the side of Buff or Nerf Rogue.
I would like to see them do a double pull here, but I'm not completely sure if they will pull it on top of each other. Now, the one reason why I like this skip on the tentacles is because of necrotic. As you mentioned, those tentacles need to be tanked the whole time. The tank can't start kiting or do anything like that because the tentacles will start AoEing the group. So I do like the skip here coming in and just playing the bridge packs instead. Now, the one thing I don't like though is if you skip the tentacle pack, then you might as well just pull both of those bridge packs on top of each other just to be more efficient and faster.
Yeah, Black Mamba is definitely going to have to go back and do the tentacle pack just because of how their count's going to end up working over the course of the whole entire instance there. It looks like they were using their distracts to kind of delay that patrol into walking into them for a couple seconds in order for them to be able to DPS down a couple of the mobs, just making sure that Wong doesn't end up having too many necrotic stacks, whereas Buff or Nerf Rogue here dealing with a similar pack, and then they're going to be on to Lord Stormsong here in just a couple seconds. So they're pretty far ahead just because of the major blunders that Black Mamba made towards the beginning of the instance.
Yeah, Buff or Nerf Rogue already done with this bridge pack here. They need to kill both of those Dweller packs to make sure they have the 80% trash percentage and the 80% reaping wave. Once they go into the last boss room, there's exactly 20% trash left, so they will have to proc that 80% wave here. You can see the Rogue actually dropping very low here as those Dwellers constantly cast Lash on random targets, and it just does so much damage, especially if you get hit by multiple of them in a row.
Yeah, it ends up stacking up just super high, and then like that's why you see them kind of standing there waiting for a second, waiting for the Lash debuff to drop off before pulling the extra Abyss Dweller pack. They of course have walked up to the Lord Stormsong room, so there's a minor roleplay event happening where you end up having to wait just a couple seconds for Lord Stormsong to end up spawning, so that's why they're in the meantime dealing with these Abyss Dwellers while Lord Stormsong is spawning. Black Mamba here backtracking to these Ayaya tentacles, making sure that Wong ends up staying low on necrotic stacks. Of course, he's sitting at looks like 34 stacks here, so he could actually be going down here if he ends up getting too many more.
You see Buff or Nerf Rogue actually not being able to get rid of this whole reaping wave here, so they gotta be very careful here because there's just so many Tormented Souls, so many casters that continuously cast a Grateful. So you gotta watch out that you don't have anyone die here. It happened to Abracadabra actually, where their Rest Druid went down to just having those Tormented Souls go off, and they had to reset the whole boss because of course you can't rest the Rest Druid. So now we have a MC going in onto Loda. Very good for them to have it on the Rest Druid because of course if it's on a damage dealer you lose a lot more damage. So very good RNG coming in for Buff or Nerf Rogue here.
Yeah, it could have been dangerous just because of all those Grave Bolts that could have been going out there, but Loda does end up getting broken out of that mind control very quickly. Of course, you can also use your Cloak of Shadows in order to be able to immune that Ancient Mindbender cast, which does mind control you, but it ended up going on the Resto Druid, which is another great option for them. Loda back in cat form, of course, DPSing here, as he is doing about 10k DPS, while Tomboy and Marito doing about 40k, but it is kind of inflated just because of the Reaping spawning on the boss. If they were doing 40k single target, they would actually be very powerful. Black Mamba has engaged Lord Stormsong, but they are just so far behind now. There's also a 6 death differential as well.
Yeah, you see the cloak coming out of Tomboya right here. One thing to note about the Cloak of Shadows is that, of course, you don't know who is getting mind controlled. You don't know beforehand, so you need to just randomly cloak and hope that it goes on you to get rid of it. You can't cloak once the ability is already on you, so that's something you gotta watch out for on Buff or Nerf Rogue side. But they just seem to have so much single target damage, and they've also been lucky with the mind controls. It's either going on their healer or going in a rogue with their Cloak of Shadows up. And as I said before, they do have their Bloodlust available because they're saving it all the way to the last boss, and they just know that they're not going to get a third usage, and that's why they're just holding on to it.
So something interesting happened on the small screen. Black Mamba, Hanks ended up getting that mind control, and he instantly jumped in the water. So basically, if you drop below 50% health, you instantly break out of that mind control as well. Most of the time, people end up soaking all those balls there in order to be able to kind of clear up all the space, but Hanks elected to jump into the water. He ended up swimming too far down and ends up proccing his cheat death as a result whenever he did end up coming out of that mind control. So that was just kind of like I would say that was a pretty big mistake there from Hanks. Just losing his cheat death is something that you could have ended up soaking the balls and then just getting DPS down by the other members. Buff War Nerf Rogue here is making their way onto Volzith, while Black Mamba here is at 28% on Lord Stormsong, so they're pretty far behind here.
Yeah, we'll see what Buff War Nerf Rogue does here with the trash in this room. We've seen teams pull some trash before or do it after with the boss from the boss. We actually saw a pre-pot coming in here, so I assume they're going to pull some of the eels before they engage with the boss side. We also see the tricks coming in from the rogues. Now those eel packs are just super dangerous with these affix combinations. You have Raging and you also have Necrotic, and those eels by default apply this bleed stack, as you can see in the group frames right now. This stacks up and does a lot of damage over time, shadow damage. So on top of Necrotic doing damage and making you not healable that well, and then they all start Raging at the same time. That's why you see the damage dealers drop so low.
Yeah, Lazorus has a 9 stack of that eel debuff, which is actually super scary. You actually did see the Shockwave coming in really early, probably a little bit earlier than you would prefer. So the Shockwave wore off, and then all of the eels enraged at the exact same time at like 30% health as that Shockwave did end up wearing off. They end up DPSing down that pack okay. Nobody ends up going down, so it all ends up being okay for Buff War Nerf Rogue as they have pulled Volzith.
Yeah, and you also got to watch out, even if you see the eels when they're raging, the dot is still on you and it's still going to do increased damage because of raging. So that's why the eels are so dangerous, because they can't really prevent or the dot, or you can't remove the dot unless you have a huge immunity like a bubble. And of course, there's no paladins here. So now Buff War Nerf Rogue, of course, on the Volzith here on the last boss fight as they go into the intermission phase here, and Loda also has the damage buff on him already. Now, once they're done with this intermission phase, they have to deal with some of the trash, and then they need to use their bloodlust to make sure they don't get a second intermission phase.
Yeah, Loda with that damage buff is actually going to be the person to watch here. Of course, he does end up getting a big damage increase, but he also has reduced health based on how many stacks he does have of that Promises of Power buff here. It'll end up allowing them to one-phase Volzith once they do end up coming out of this intermission here with the use of Bloodlust. They're going to probably be pulling these Forgotten and Sunken Denizens here off to the side that you do see once they do end up coming out of this. But something to make sure is that if Loda does end up going down, of course, he is their only battle res for the team, and it's actually very challenging to be able to reset Volzith, so it would actually spell disaster for Buff War Nerf Rogue. So making sure that Loda doesn't take any damage from anything, whether it's the Forgotten Denizens getting these Sunken the Consume Essence cast come off, or any of the eel damage or anything, is very important here.
Or getting aggro, really. It's very easy for a healer with a buff like that to get aggro, because not only do you generate healing aggro, but you also generate a lot of damage aggro. As you can see, Loda just topping the damage here. So you definitely got to watch out, especially on the Sunken Denizen here, because it does so much damage to the tank, and the tank sometimes just wants to go ahead and kite, and then the aggro is going to be lower than you want it to be. But Loda making sure he does not get the aggro, still doing 30k DPS here, and now they're going to engage the boss, and now they're going to use the Bloodlust, and they need to do enough damage to make sure they're not getting the second intermission phase.
Yeah, that would actually be so bad for them. As you actually do see Tomboy and Marito ending up getting lashed by that tentacle and almost ending up going down. That would almost spell disaster for Buff War Nerf Rogue. Marito actually not having his cheat death available, so that was actually very scary from them. As Black Mamba has pulled Volzith as well. They are onto the trash that sits in front of Volzith with the Forgotten and Sunken Denizens here. But it looks like Buff War Nerf Rogue should end up taking this as long, bar a major mistake from them.
Yeah, that was so bad for them too, because Loda had to go out of cat form, make sure they're healed up again, and Lester's getting hit by one of those tentacles too. They need to make sure that Loda can be in cat form as much as possible, because he's the one who does the most damage out of the whole group, the most single target damage to this boss. So if Loda needs to go ahead and heal some of their members, they're going to lose a lot of damage. So not very well done by Buff War Nerf Rogue. Hopefully they still have enough damage to get the boss. And they're getting hit again! What are Buff War Nerf Rogue doing at this point? They had such a clean run here, and the cast is going through, and they get the second intermission phase. No! This is just so bad for them. They have to do a second intermission phase. It's going to cost them so much time, and they're also so incredibly low, as the healer and the tank are in a different phase compared to all the damage dealers. We see the cheat death blocking on Marito here as one of the casts went through. If there's anything else happening, they get hit by anything whatsoever, they're going to die.
Yeah, Black Mamba, it could actually capitalize and maybe make their way back up. Marito ends up going down there. That was actually so bad. Black Mamba here at 24% on Volzith. If they are actually able to one-phase it here, they could actually end up coming back, because all they end up needing is those 2 packs of eels that are off to the side here. And with the boss at 2%, Marito does end up getting battle res here in just a couple seconds. So there is a 5 death differential as well, which separates the teams 25 seconds. So that's also something to point out. As Volzith does go down for Black Mamba, they only have the 2 eel packs left, while Buff War Nerf Rogue is still in the intermission.
The healer might die because there's actually one ad reaching the boss. Okay, never mind. So the healer did ended up dispelling himself, so he does not have the buff anymore. This is why this is taking them so long, because the healer does not have the buff anymore. He dispelled himself. Everything just takes much longer. Black Mamba already down the boss. They only have to deal with this EO pack, and now Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue only has 25 seconds to deal with everything else. Else Black Mamba is going to be the one who wins this.
Yeah, so 24-42 on the side of Black Mamba. We need to. That's the timer to be watching on the side of Buff War. Of course, these 2-pack of eels with their Enrage Affix and the Necrotic can actually be very scary. So we could actually see some deaths coming in here for Buff War Nerf Rogue if they're not careful. So making sure that they do this pack cleanly is actually going to be crucial for them. It looks like it might just be it. Them not getting that phase is actually just so bad.
Yeah, it's going to be Black Mamba winning this one, as Buff Warrior just makes a huge
Nerf Rogue.
Yeah, so that's how we've seen this dungeon multiple times now. It makes it a little bit more difficult because of the Sanguine affix, but we are most likely going to see both of those teams go to the left side first, use their Bloodlust or not use their Bloodlust, but do a pretty big pull.
Yeah, we've actually seen the difference in pull depending on whether or not you end up pulling that second Augur into this pack, as whether or not people use Bloodlust a lot of the time. You actually do see both teams here not grabbing that extra Confessor, just grabbing the extra pack in that corner. Both of them using their Bloodlust, and both of the healers here standing in a corner or on an elevated surface to where the Juggernauts end up casting that charge, but ended up not being able to complete it because they don't end up having a line of sight on the furthest target, which ends up being the healer here.
You definitely got to be careful here because it's not actually the furthest target, it's on any random target that is on range of the Juggernaut. So because of Sanguine, you got to be careful because you need those knocks, right? You see the Typhoons coming in, the Ring of Pieces coming in, and if they get knocked and then you're not close enough to them, then the charge could be on melee. So you definitely got to be watching out for that one to make sure you follow them up as soon as they get knocked, as Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue is doing one of those snapping pulls, and hopefully none of them is falling off.
Oh my goodness, their tank is dropping incredibly low here, making sure that you do end up healing off that Grievous as Loda frantically tries to catch back up here. He ends up getting him topped up. The Sards here are dying kind of... Okay, so they end up dying all at once here, just getting the Sanguine ended up spawning right on that ledge here as they have pulled Razan here. Black Mamba doing a little bit more trash. They end up doing the Sky Screamer, and they end up snapping it down on top of Razan as well. So it's a little bit more efficient from Black Mamba, but they are just still a couple seconds behind, but this is actually very good for them.
Ching dropping so low as he has to bleed from the boss on him, and you can see also tanking the Reaping Weapon, having so many magic debuff stacks on top as well. As Loda is just struggling to heal him back up, but now you're going to see the Fix It coming out, so Ching can actually have a moment of where he doesn't get hit by the boss at all, and Ching actually getting the Fix It on him, which is not very good because, okay, so he Shadow Melted the Fix It off, but now he's getting melee attacked again, so I'm not sure if this was the best choice at all, as he also gets one of those Bleed Divas again on himself because he Shadow Melted the Fix It away. Now usually if you have a Fix It on you and you kite the boss, he does it into the tank and you just have a room of, you know, recovering, but Ching just kind of Shadow Melting it off, even though he was low HP and having to deal with, but they managed to recover now.
Yeah, Tomboy Uwu had like 11 stacks of the Reaping Dot on him as well, ends up proccing his cheat death there, so that was actually very scary for the side of Buff War Nerf Rogue, in addition to the issues that were happening with Ching. Black Mamba here, no issues. They end up getting that Sanguine spawned away from Razan. I actually really like this model of Razan here. Yeah, but that Sanguine is actually just so close. They're probably waiting for a little bit longer before they do end up getting it spawned. Somebody's getting devoured? Is that
Ching got eaten!
Oh my goodness!
Ching the tank oh my god, this is so close. He almost went down here, and now he's gonna get the bleed debuff from the boss. So Ching definitely in trouble here. Loda needs to make sure he heals him up, as he just got eaten in the very last one. And the bleed actually goes on Tomboyo, who does not have cheat death available. So he goes down here because there's no way he can survive this bleed effect. Now they do have one battle rest available, so they can get him back up. As long as the rogues, actually everyone got feared except the tank from the AoE fear, as they did not line of sight. And then we see the Sky Screamers here as well. They need to get the rest up as fast as possible because they need the interrupts on the Sky Screamers that they pulled here. But this is just very sloppy play by Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue.
What is happening here for Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue? Black Mamba here having so much more of a clean pull, having these two Sky Screamers on the bottom half of Razan, making sure that they probably end up killing Razan just a couple seconds prior to the Sky Screamers in order to not Sanguine that boss, because Sanguining a boss here would actually just be so bad because it end up requiring them just to have so much more time in order to be able to DPS through him, because Razan is actually pretty challenging to move. You actually see a ton of reanimated raptors sitting on top of Ching for Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue. It looks like some of the members of that team also got feared into more of the reanimated raptor pools. I don't actually know what's happening on the side of Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue. It's just so sloppy for them. Black Mamba is already down Razan and those two Sky Screamers that are making their way towards Volcall.
Yeah, buff for Nerf Rogue just struggling as Jing drops very low with 4 Reaver stacks and also having to bleed them down. And now we see the stack, but the boss is actually healing. The boss is healing to 20%. Jing is going down. They don't have a battle rush. They need to reset the boss. This is going to be a full team wipe after they wasted so much time on this spot. This is just a disaster for buff for Nerf Rogue. Not only did they have the full team wipe, but they basically killed the boss. But then he had it heal, and it's just a disaster for buff for Nerf Rogue.
Oh my goodness, what is actually going on? Buff for Nerf Rogue not being able to shake off all the issues that they did have at the very end of last match of Sign of the Storm. Just having such a major blunder here on Razan. Loda finally does end up going down as Razan ends up resetting. Man, that was unlucky. Black Mamba here dealing with their pull on their way to full call as they are firmly in the driver's seat, firmly asserting themselves as the team that's most likely going to win this Atal'Dazar here.
Yeah, it's really all on Black Mamba at this point, and they might just have the upset here, winning against the number 3 team, Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue, as they just just having so many mistakes at the end of Shrine, and then they just had, I don't know, maybe they just didn't recover from it and just had bad mentality here. They didn't manage to keep a cool head as they just have so many mistakes, and Black Mamba already procced their 41% Reaping Wave. They're on their way to the next boss here. This is really a mistake by Wong as he pulled this trash, and Blue also going down, but as long as the healer stays out of combat, they can rest him back up.
Yeah, most of the time this would actually be a pretty big blunder, but for Black Mamba, they are just so far ahead that this is actually not an issue. I actually did see somebody from the side of Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue ending up pulling that invisible stalker that you do actually have at the very beginning of the instance, so they had to backtrack and try to get that as well. Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue also pulling some more of those reanimated raptors right on top of Razan as well. Finally back on the boss, DPSing it as well, while Black Mamba here DPSing down the reanimation totems.
Yeah, you actually saw them get rest and pull the boss immediately. Now, I'm not sure if I like seeing that, because they could have just sat down, ate a fish face for 1 second and get full HP, because as soon as you get in combat with anything whatsoever and you're not full HP, you get the Grievous applied to you. So as soon as they pulled the boss, both Blue and Wong had the Grievous. The healer had to heal them back up as fast as possible, but they did manage. So in the end, they did save some time too, because of course the healer, as soon as the healer needs to heal, he can't do DPS. But on a Grievous environment, especially when there's AoE damage coming in, the healer can't really do that much damage anyway, so it didn't cost them that much in the end.
Yep, you actually do see the Shrine coming in for the healer of Black Mamba. They, like you said, they could have sat down and eaten, maybe actually walked into the kitchen, made some food, made some food for themselves as well. Buff for Nerf Rogue at 40% on Razan, while Black Mamba here at 80% on Volcall. It's very important to note that Volcall also does a pretty significant amount of damage to himself, so teams are probably not likely to pop major damaging cooldowns, especially since the pull after Volcall is normally very dangerous with the Witch Doctors, the Shadow Stalkers, and the Shield Bearers.
Yeah, so in this phase 2, there's you see the green pool spawning really, but other than that, you just kite the boss around. As you can see, very nice movement here too. You slowly, as a tank, you just slowly walk around, make sure that the melees don't have to stand in the pools, you yourself don't stand in the pools, the boss doesn't stand in the pools. But, you know, there's so much room, especially in a fortified setting, that you don't have to min-max completely. You don't have to make sure that you save every single inch of space. You can just move as you go, as you can see them do. Now, the only thing you gotta watch out for is that the boss does not die right next to this to the spears of the entrance, because as soon as the boss is down, the spears go down, and then you can aggro the body pull, the trash here, and you really don't want that to happen.
Yep, and both bosses going down within mere seconds of one another. Unfortunately, Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue is a full boss behind on the side of Black Mamba. Do you think Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue is going to fall off the platform as the prophecy foretold?
At this point, it really doesn't matter anymore. You see Black Mamba here doing the Stalker pull on top of the caster pull. Now, this is a very dangerous pull because there's multiple casters who constantly cast the Venom Blast, who need to be constantly interrupted, the Witch Doctors, and then you also get the Hexed cast, which also needs to be interrupted. And on top of all of that, you also have a lot of tank damage going in. Now, Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue still just having trouble as their tank goes down. This is just a disaster for them. Probably a full team wipe coming in one more time. But anyway, let's focus on Black Mamba as Blue actually goes down here from one of those Venom Blasts that's just doing so much damage. They do have a Battle Rush and get him back up, and they just need to make sure they finish off this pull. As I said, this is a very dangerous pull, and especially with Sanguine coming in, we see one Hex coming out as well on the Rogue as he cloaks it off while he's away, but they're about to finish off this pull, even though one of the Witch Doctors is healing into the Sanguine.
Yeah, I mean, as long as this isn't bolstering, it's actually really easy for you to be able to just like instantly nuke down these Witch Doctors because they are just so dangerous with their Venom Blasts. They just require so many kicks from the side of Black Mamba, so I actually would have preferred to see them just kind of nuking down both of the Witch Doctors there, and then just making sure that they do end up knockbacking those Stalkers and those Shield Bearers. As you do actually see Wong here on the side of Black Mamba getting Tricks of the Traded. All of those mobs ending up getting right on top of him on that shadow, on that snap spot, getting kicks on the Festering Sky Screamers as Wong does end up coming out of that snap spot, but ends up instantly dying here for Black Mamba. This is definitely not what you're looking to do, as both of the rogues end up popping their parry, their riposte as it actually is called. And you do actually see the Sky Screamers getting knocked into the Sanguine as they cast Terrifying Screech. Is healing to full.
This is such a risky pull for them to do at this point. They must know that they're so far ahead. They must be watching the stream. They must be seeing that buff warrior rogue is not even on Volcala yet. So I don't really understand why they're doing a double sword, double Sky Screamer snapping pull. There's just so much damage on the tank. You get autos cast, you have the Sanguine spawning in the same spot, everything's healing. So I don't like this coming out of Black Mamba. They should just be playing this safe, because if they can even pull pack by pack, if they pull everything slowly and just make sure it dies, they're gonna be the ones who win. So they should not be risking anything, because it's the whole series on the line, and it's the land spot on the line for Black Mamba here. So I really would like to see them just play it safe and finish off the dungeon without any sort of mistakes.
Yeah, this is actually super sad for a company, the other team that could have potentially have made it to land. Black Mamba here looking like they are definitely firmly in the driver's seat, as Wong is standing in that snap spot with the Reaping having spawned. It's just kind of running up to him and just kind of looking at him. I wonder if it's actually evading or not. I would have to be seeing that. You actually do see them ending up killing the SARs there, as Wong does end up jumping out of the snap spot, and everybody's dropping so low from the side of Black Mamba, and they're going to maybe have a full wipe here.
You see a battle rush coming out of Wong here, and one of the fears actually went through. You can see the healer, the wrestler, just being feared from one of those Sky Screamers, but Wong did manage to get back up, and he might be able to get the aggro back, as the healer just drops lower and lower, and one of the rogues probably has aggro too. It's so difficult for a tank to get the aggro back when you die in those big pulls, especially with Reaping mobs. It's really hard for him to get the aggro, but we see the healers barely having any mana left to be able to heal away the Grievous stacks accumulating in all those people. But we see finally Blue, the Monk, and the other rogue managed to get back, and they should be able to finish off this pull, but they can't make those mistakes anymore when they're so far ahead. Please, Black Mamba.
They would have to wipe on Priestess Alunza or Yasma in order for Buff or Nerf Rogue to be able to catch back up. But these are just major blunders by Black Mamba that could actually just have lost the matches if it were any other set. Like, just Buff or Nerf Rogue's catastrophic start on Razan was just so bad here. Black Mamba and Wong running into the next pack here. While it looks like their DPS is just kind of standing around here for a second, pulling that Sky Screamer, while Wong is already face tanking that Augur pull underneath that archway over there.
Yeah, so double Sky Screamer plus the Augur pull. Now this is a lot of tank damage. We've seen some teams fail to this very same pull already in the past. You definitely gotta watch out for this, especially with Grievous, and you also don't want to deal with the Sanguine properly. So either you have someone taunt out the mobs that are dying, or you have very well-timed Ring of Pieces come out and Typhoons, as we can see right now, just to be sure that none of those mobs actually heal.
Yeah, they could have probably also dragged the mob straight through the Sanguine, healed them all the way up to full, and it would still be okay, as Buff or Nerf Rogue is downing Volcall here in a second. Buff or Nerf Rogue is actually putting themselves in a position to be able to maybe capitalize and come back if Black Mamba did end up making a very critical error with this very large trash pull in front of Priestess Alunza. This trash pull is actually very scary, because not only does it have a ton of mobs that end up needing kicks with the Augur here, but additionally the Sanguine is actually very difficult to deal with, because your Resto Druid more often than not is going to be standing in one of these snap line of sight spots so that they can bait the Juggernaut cast. You actually do see the Resto Druid here running around to the side, getting in that spot like I said, so they're not going to have access to this Typhoon, so it's going to be very challenging in order to move all the mobs. But Black Mamba is tanking this whole entire pack with Bloodlust, with the Reaping as well. Buff or Nerf Rogue though is dealing with the very scary trash pull after Volcall at the bottom of that staircase.
Now, one thing to mention as well, that they did proc their Reaping Wave before they went into this pool, and some of the mobs, most of them have aggro on the healer, of course, because the healer is the only one who generates aggro with healing. So once the Reaping Wave came in, the healer actually was the one having aggro, but because he was standing in the snapping spot over there, they were just kind of standing on the stairs doing nothing and casting Grave Bolt. So that could have been a disaster, but they ended up dealing with it very well, as they already pulled Priestess Alunza here, and it's really all about Black Mamba as they're dealing with the rest of the Reaping Souls here and dealing with Alunza.
Can't these Gilded Priestesses kind of bug out if you end up pulling it with Priestess Alunza, just because of the ground effect that we do see? Priestess Alunza is getting healed by Say. going. So topped all the way off. You actually do see the Spirit of Gold off to the side. He has ran out into the middle of the room here. I hope he didn't end up picking up any of those pools on the ground as well. As Buff War Nerf Rogue is dropping so low here, I think they're going to be able to recover here in just a couple seconds, but Ching ends up going down on the side of Buff War Nerf Rogue, so this is actually just even more of an issue as they have procced their reaping. They might be able to recover here, but Black Mamba here already on Priestess. It's so far gone for them.
Black Mamba might actually... Okay, so hear me out here. They might actually end up wiping because not only did the Spirit of Gold eat some of the pulls, they did not have all 5 transfusions go through on the members, as Alunza only dropped to 96% after the transfusion. But the healer is also completely out of mana as they just chain pulled the boss without him being able to Shadow Melt or get a drink off. Now in this boss there's really not much AoE damage except the transfusion, but there's tank damage coming at the same time. So, okay, never mind. The healer already has mana back up, so there's no way they can really wipe on this boss unless they keep not seeing the Spirit of Gold, as we've seen at the very start, or have the Priestess somehow in Sanguine. Now they only need 3% trash, which is only the last Sky Screamer that they're going to be pulling to the last boss. But yeah, just Buff War Nerf Rogue, 11 deaths, having so much trouble, and it's really just this first Rasan wipe, because all the other things that happened to them later on didn't cost them as much time as this very first Rasan wipe. There was just an insane amount of time loss.
Yeah, they need to be killing Priestess here in just a couple %, because if they did end up actually getting another Spirit of Gold, I don't actually think they have enough CC in order to be able to CC him full time, so that would actually just be super bad. But Priestess does end up going down, so it ends up being okay, but that was almost just a major blunder from Black Mamba. That was actually just so bad for them. Buff War Nerf Rogue here, dealing with some of these Sarids and the Sky Screamers right here. They have procced their 60% reaping, but they're still just so far behind. Black Mamba has already down Priestess Alunza, and they are making their way onto Yasma here in just a couple seconds.
Yeah, so they gotta watch out with Yasma, because of course they don't have any battle rushes left anymore on Black Mamba's side, as they also have 7 deaths. So they're actually dealing with the swords here, which might be able to proc their reaping wave and then the Shadow Melt it off before they go to the last boss, which is something we've seen before. And I really like this strategy, because dealing with the Sky Screamer while also having the Yasma, the boss, at the same time can be dangerous. So I like this by Black Mamba, as they know they're so far ahead. They might as well just deal with this now and don't have to deal with the Sky Screamer on top of Yasma. So right now, they don't have their Bloodlust available. They have to kill Yasma without the Bloodlust, but as long as they play safe, don't have any spiders, members get hit by spiders or anything like that, they should be fine.
Yeah, definitely hope that nobody ends up going down on the side of Black Mamba. It would actually only be super detrimental to them if their healer did end up going down, just because he's the one who ends up keeping them alive, of course. If they do end up having that battle res available to them at some point, which they probably won't just because of how long this fight should end up taking, he would end up being the only one available to battle res. So it's definitely only a major mistake if Wong or their healer does end up going down here. It's just something to note, too, with how they ended up pulling the Sarid packs. This Buff War Nerf Rogue is wiping again. Oh my goodness, no!
They were just dealing with one of those trash bags. A Rogue died, and then the tank just kited the mobs through the fire gauntlet. And as he was kiting them, people just got hit by the fire, they got hit by cast, things just went bad. I mean, at this point, Buff War Nerf Rogue probably knows how far behind they are, and maybe that's why they're trying to do those risky kind of things and end up dying to it. But this is just a disaster for them. Black Mamba is on Yasma. Let's just focus on Black Mamba, because they're the ones who might be able to 2-0 Buff War Nerf Rogue, which really nobody expected, except of course Tails and Towers, who said that they're gonna win because the other team is gonna fall off the platform, which thankfully was something that did not happen to Buff War Nerf Rogue yet. But so many other things happened to them, so they might as well just fall off the bridge too at this point.
Rat should have guessed that they died in the fire gauntlet.
Now Black Mamba, of course, on 30% as they get the Soul Rend here. Now, one of the very last Soul Rends they get, they're just gonna watch out really that they're not gonna get hit by the spiders and make sure they interrupt the boss. And that's really it for them.
Yeah, making sure that that Soul Rend doesn't end up walking into the boss is also very important, because that would actually put a very steep dot on them. We have seen some teams in the past be able to heal through 1 stack of that, but if it ended up being any more, most of the group would actually probably just instantly die. I actually really liked how they ended up dealing with those Saras right before that. You can actually pull the Saras out of that Dinomancer pack with either Distract, or you can actually Paralysis the lead Sarid out of the pack, so you can actually just pull that whole entire group and then not pull the Dinomancer and his 2 Dinosaurs there. Yasma here going down here as Black Mamba takes the series 2-0.
Waycrest Manor is not something we've seen yet, actually, this weekend from the teams, and certainly a very subtle affixes coming in for the both of them, as Black Mamba actually starts with the essences at the beginning of the dungeon. A fairly light pull, something that we see combined with some other trash from other teams, especially in this kind of freebie of combination of affixes, especially with the Quaking. But Team D getting straight to the point right now as they rush in, pull the entire triad, especially all the trash in the room as well. Usually a lot of damage coming in here, especially because of that aura at the very beginning of the fight that decreases healing by 50%. Black Mamba taking it a bit easier as they're Quaking pulses and they get the Heartsbane triad.
Yeah, Long here showing why Protection Warriors are the most OP tank here, doing 100k DPS burst there. It's also interesting to note that we actually do not see any Death Knight DPS here. Unholy DK, of course, has been a fan favorite inside this Waycrest Manor because of the 1 million DPS pull inside of Raw's room, and for other reasons, just because of how big you are able to actually pull inside of some of the pulls here. In non-affix, like non-dangerous affix situations here, like we do see with Skittish and Quaking, I would actually prefer to see maybe a DPS DK, but maybe there's a reason that they're not playing it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, perhaps in preparation of the future maps coming up in the series, but Black Mamba has actually used their heroism on a trash pull here, looking to likely proc their first Reaping and then pull that into the Heartsbane Triad. Also, just appreciation here for the Pro Rares. We actually have Long versus Wong right now, so very exciting for that series coming up between those two Protection Warriors.
Yeah, you do actually see Black Mamba here pulling some of these captains and guards in the Witch here, electing to use their Bloodlust there, where Team D ended up using it elsewhere. You actually do see Team D here finally DPSing down Selena. They will be moving on to Milady here in just a couple seconds as she does claim the Iris. Milady, of course, forcing you to move around a lot, ends up putting a big curse on everybody, doing a little bit of damage, but overall not too super dangerous. Of course, Briar with the Jagged Nettles cast can be kind of dangerous, but overall it shouldn't be too bad, especially for the bottom 50% here.
The Jagged Nettles cast, yes, of course. Yeah, Briar, now it basically enacts as a Grievous wound, right? So once you below that 90% threshold, because it does hit you for a fair amount of damage at the start, you do need to heal the player back up above 90 to get rid of that increasing bleed on them. So no problem for them as Team D is about to down the Heartsbane Triad, which Fiesta essentially here on the left side, and move on to the trash that Black Mamba has already worked very hard towards right now, pulling a lot of the most dangerous trash, at least for the tank in the dungeon, with these guards and captains doing an immense amount of damage. Black Mamba looking to proc their 20%, and likely, I would assume, drag it straight into that Heartsbane's Triad and start their first boss, combining it with Reaping.
Oh my lord, Team D's pull is actually enormous here. They ended up pulling the guards and the captains here, and then they run it all the way back into the very starting room as that door ended up opening, and they're pulling it into the Soul Essences. So this is actually scary because they're not using their Bloodlust here because they don't have it available.
This is the pull that we saw from some of the West teams in the past week. Now, they had a Raging environment, so making it particularly perilous for the tanks, but it should be okay with the defensive Ring of Peace coming up. We see Long actually just opting to play a bit more offensive and dipping in, not even using that Ring of Peace to his use. Black Mamba now dealing with the Heartsbane Triad first boss here. A lot of damage coming in on Wong, as there needs to be frequent dispels coming in from those Reaping Souls, the Reaping wave coming in on top of the team here. Finally, they get out of the Selena phase, and they have full healing strength as the minus 50% healing reduction aura has disappeared, and we now turn into an aura that requires you to move constantly, else you will stack an increasing damage over time effect.
Yep, and Team D finally does get rid of the last couple of mobs there, and they're making their way towards the room here. Okay, they're stopping to pull some of these captains and these guards. They're probably going to end up procking their Witch that they ended up not getting right before that big pull there. Whereas Black Mamba here, they should probably be looking to pull some of these Acolytes and Toads off to the side in order to be able to get some efficient count after Selena does end up going down, after Briar does get phased here at 50%. The reason that you want to pull these Acolytes and Toads into the boss is just because it's super efficient in terms of how much count you're able to get, especially whenever you're just cleaving it with the boss, where Team D here doing a little bit smaller of a pull. They actually, okay, I don't actually think they ended up proccing their Witch. Maybe they end up skipping it. So that's interesting.
Yeah, we'll see exactly what they do with the Lieutenant Mom that spawns there. But on the side of Black Mamba, you don't really want Sister Selena's aura kind of pulsing her healing reduction aura during pulling of trash on top of that. So they do well not to deal with that, as the healing Tree of Life does come out on the side of the rest of Druid for Black Mamba right now, making sure to get everyone nice and healthy for the damage aura coming up with Sister Milady as she dips down sub 20% health, and then it will soon work on Briar. So this boss has actually proven to be quite tough, especially with these aggressive pulls that we've seen in previous weeks for some of the Western teams. But Team D and Black Mamba actually do it quite masterfully on either side, one with Reaping and one, of course, with the trash in the room. We've seen both with variations throughout the cups on the previous weeks. Massive pull here from Team D in the courtyard, leading up to the Soulbound Goliath.
Yes, they ended up actually skipping that Witch. They ended up just kind of hugging that right-hand wall in order to be able to miss the proc on that Witch. That's actually a very interesting strategy from Team D here, as they do end up proccing their first Reaping, as they do end up killing those jagged, those hounds out in that courtyard area, just having their Reaping and kind of trickling in, and then they're making sure that they do end up kill all the mobs that they want to proc their 40% Reaping in this courtyard area, likely to set up for a 40-ish% Reaping pull into Soulbound Goliath, because of course if you do end up having mobs that walk through that doorway, you will end up resetting the boss.
Yeah, it's important to know, and you don't want to kind of commit a lot of offensive cooldowns to the boss and then all of a sudden have it disappear in front of your eyes. So Team D doing well to do just that as they reach 31% trash. Black Mamba has now moved over to this same courtyard area, dealing well with these Vine Twisters, interrupting that Soul Fetish. Don't want that cast going off, especially if they're one of the first mobs to die. They reach 29% trash and are starting to pull some more of these Thorn Shapers, along with the corner 3 pack, which is oftentimes a very optional pack. We've seen a really 50-50 split between team strats of what their pull order is. Team D here aggressively pulling a lot of the Rawls haul trash into the courtyard and looking to proc their 40% Reaping. Now, Tettles, you're going to be curious to see most of the teams that we saw in the West will proc their 40% Reaping and then combine it with Matron Brindle, the kind of mini-boss guarding the Soulbound Goliath, into the Soulbound Goliath themselves and do a fairly heavy pull.
Yeah, that's actually super scary, but just because on the tank, it can just get very dangerous, because Matron Brindle she doesn't do a ton of tank damage, but she does end up it just ends up stacking up with how much ends up coming from the Reaping dot, plus Soulbound Goliath does a pretty sizable amount of tank damage if he does end up having too many stacks on him. Of course, you don't really want to reset him all the time, especially on pull whenever you do have all of your cooldowns rolling and everything else. Black Mamba here has made it to the courtyard area, and they're kiting around some of the mobs. It looks like one of the Thorn Guards has that Soul Fetish on him. So basically, whenever you do end up getting that, let that Soul Fetish cast end up going off, it will end up putting the Soul Fetish on one of those mobs. Whenever that mob ends up dying, it will end up transferring a 5 stack of that Soul Fetish to some of the surrounding mobs. And so the Thorn Guards with the 5 stack of Soul Fetish can actually just be very dangerous to the tank, as you actually see it highlighted in blue for Black Mamba.
And it was actually a double whammy slammy there for them. It wasn't just the Soul Fetish that went off, but they also let a Reconstruct Effigy cast go off. So it actually ended up healing that Thorn Guard to full and then buffing it with 50% damage and haste on top of it. But here comes the big pull from Team D. Actually, really not that big of a pull. They combine the second Reaping only with Matron Brindle right now and are looking to cleave everything down and then more safely, I suppose, aggro the Soulbound Goliath here. So a bit more of a modest pull, which is kind of shocking to me, especially coming from Team D. That was the first team to really do that whole 1 million DPS Unholy DK pull coming up. So very modest pull under this current affixes too. Kind of shocked to see that coming out of them, but nonetheless, they have pulled the Soulbound Goliath here. 94% on the board for that, as Black Mamba is wasting no time in doing that aggressive pull that we just talked about, but they haven't procced their second Reaping, but will do so once they kill these hounds on the screen.
Yeah, so in comes the Reaping here, making sure that they did have all the mobs in that courtyard area as to not reset Soulbound Goliath whenever they end up pulling it is very important here, but this can actually just be super scary for the tank. But this is how Black Mamba gets back into it. Team D was just a little bit ahead, but with Black Mamba making this more aggressive strategy of pulling this Reaping into Soulbound Goliath and Matron Brindle, it's just very good for them. So making sure that Wong, the tank for Black Mamba, getting a reset on Soulbound Goliath here whenever he does end up needing it is very important. But by and large, you actually want to end up having you just want to reset it later, as Hanks end up going down for Black Mamba there.
You Hank to see it as he gets res right away, and here comes the quaking on top of it. Just so much damage coming in on the group right now. Wong needs babysitting dispels constantly from these Reaping waves. Only 8 seconds. You can only do that every 8 seconds, of course, as the healer. Wong just dipping quite low. Matron Brindle has not been killed yet, so she's constantly pumping her damage on top of the Soulbound Goliath. That's just doing so much right now. Blue goes down. They don't have a battle res available. The Resto Druid follows suit. The Rogue follows suit, and Hank is the last one to fall right before Wong. Full team wipe here for Black Mamba. They just bit off more than they could chew. They're going to have to restart completely. They didn't even manage to kill Matron Brindle, so they downed all of the Reaping trash, but they have Matron Brindle still up. They have to repeat the Soulbound Goliath after committing probably a plethora of just various offensive cooldowns and defensive cooldowns to that pull, whilst Team D is sitting at a mighty 20% all the Soulbound Goliath.
Yeah, you truly hank to see that one. That's actually just so bad for Black Mamba. If Black Mamba did end up wanting to get back in this into this match here, they were just a little bit behind in terms of how they ended up doing their pathing at the very beginning of the instance, with Team D aggressively pulling all those guards and captains into the Soul Essences at the very beginning, but Black Mamba just taking a little bit slower. They could have afforded to take it a little bit slower since they were going to aggressively pull Matron Brindle and a Soulbound Goliath, but just proving why it's super dangerous, as Hank ended up going down, and then the Wong ended up kind of like frantically running around trying to get a reset on Soulbound Goliath because the Reaping had not ended up getting killed yet. It just ended up just being so sporadic and hectic for the group, as Team D does down Soulbound Goliath, so their tank Long is going to be looking to run through, pull some of the trash back into this courtyard area.
Yep, Team D's estranged a brother of Long the tank, pulling in the rest of the trash in the hallway right now. Now, again, you know, I mentioned this was the team that kind of did that 1 million Unholy DK DPS pull on Raw. These affixes certainly allow for that, but they don't have an Unholy DK, which is really surprising to me, coming especially out of Team D right now. So, you know, I mean, they might be able to set up, oh my god, but disaster here for Black Mamba right now. Just got interrupted by Tettles getting particularly excited as a death's coming in for Black Mamba. Wong has gone down, so has Blue Hank, and both rogues at the moment. They did get the battle res off, but opted it was not worth it because the rest of the team just ended up dying. So another full team wipe here for Black Mamba. At this point, the pull is not even that difficult. They just have Matron Brindle on top of the Soulbound Goliath and still have not managed to kill either.
Yeah, Matron Brindle ended up resetting at about 5% HP there, so that was actually very scary. For some reason, they end up losing the count. They end up having Matron Brindle not down, and so they're going to have to go back. Third time's the charm. They're going to be looking to pull Soulbound Goliath again, just kind of throwing bodies at it. Whereas Team D here, jockeying for position, they're going to be looking to pull some of the trash in Rawl's room. Definitely a more conservative pull, but with them being so far ahead, I don't necessarily hate this. I think it's easy to do, just a small pull here.
I don't hate it, but I also don't think that they're adjusting strategy based on their lead right now.
Okay.
They just don't have access to the Unholy DK. So the whole setup that they did before and that we've seen West teams do now, where you set up the third round of Reaping and the entirety of the trash in Rawl's room along with Rawl, is just not something that they can really realize because they don't have the ridiculous burst AoE damage coming out of the Unholy DK because, well, there is no Unholy DK. So 56% on the board for Team D as they're about to proc their third Reaping in a moment. They might drag this with a more modest half room pull worth of trash with Rawl, so we'll see exactly what they do in just a moment, as indeed all of the trash in Rawl's room comes in. They have to make sure to interrupt those stewards for their dinner bell silence cast, else the entire group will get silenced. But it looks like they're not pulling it with Rawl, so they're just, once again, being pretty modest. But once those bells goes off, actually, does a fair bit of damage to the group and silences Long, not too detrimental as he gets dispelled from his stacks. Black Mamba, once again, on Soulbound Goliath here as the Resto Druid finds himself in just a bit of trouble, dipping below 50% health, but they do manage to stabilize, and Matron Brindle has finally gone down.
Yeah, so we actually did see a lot of these like hyper-aggressive pulls from the Western region, and like you said, I think it was helped by the access to the Unholy Death Knight. So it's definitely interesting to see Team D, which is a team that we renown as a world-class team that we think should be very competitive with some of the Western region teams, electing to take a more safer strategy with this double rogue Windwalker Monk, and then doing modest pulls, as you stated, just trying to pull a little bit slower. But Black Mamba here just making major mistakes. Soulbound Goliath down to 30% as Wong has elected to reset Soulbound Goliath, while Team D is one almost full boss ahead as they have finally pulled Rawl, and he is down to 75%.
Team D right now, indeed, just looking quite dominant, but not in a very aggressive way. Just they're having the match kind of handed to them with Black Mamba at 20% on Soulbound Goliath right now, as that Tree of Life should soon be fading from the Resto Druid. They managed to stabilize and get Matron Brindle down, as mentioned earlier, but they're 12 deaths on the board versus Team D's 0. That's an entire minute behind the dungeon. Not to mention that they're finishing off a boss that Team D has prior dealt with, minutes and minutes ago. So Team D would really have to throw this match hard to even lose. I mean, they could have a full wipe here and still recover well and probably win this dungeon. Rawl now down to 45% as Soulbound Goliath finally falls for Black Mamba, and they'll be heading over into Rawl's Hall, something that Team D has already well worked on.
Yeah, you actually did see Rawl there. He looked like he ended up consuming 2 of the servants, of course giving him a 5% damage buff per servant consumed. Of course, this is not the most dangerous thing just because of how Rawl's damage ends up going out. You can actually dodge all these Tender Rises and make sure that you dodge a lot of Rawl's damage. So him getting 5% per servant, not normally the most dangerous thing. The Rotten Expulsion, of course, can also be kind of dangerous, but just making sure that you kind of sidestep out of it. Him eating those servants, not exactly scary.
He has honestly such low baseline damage that the percentage increase from the servants is really quite insignificant. The only danger is actually sitting in the groups on the ground. Those do a substantial amount of damage, even in Fortified, but I mean, it shouldn't be very hard for you to move out of non-moving void zones on the ground. The only pain in the butt really is sometimes they can cover a fair portion of the melee area. So the melee, because he has such a small hitbox, have not a lot of room to stand in, the tank included with that. So you have to find some special pockets, but it shouldn't be was no problem, rather, for Team D as they move on into the kitchen area and cleaved in all the Magus. We do see, of course, the Rune Weaver Lieutenant style mobs spawn here. They'll have to take a bit to chew through that, really. A lot of interrupts coming in, a lot of tank damage that comes out of that, but they're looking to efficiently take it downstairs by the looks of it and cleave it with some of the trash in the basement.
Yeah, I think that we've seen a lot of teams pulling the maggots with Raw at the bottom percent. Of course, Team D doesn't necessarily have to do this just because of how far Black Mamba is behind it. It looks like the healer of Black Mamba is dropping incredibly low here. Quaking coming through as they have pulled Raw, and Wong proccing his boss up his bargain, and the healers goes down for Black Mamba. This is so bad. They're going to end up having to reset Raw, and they're going to have a full wipe here coming in for Black Mamba. So just another mistake coming from them, having another full wipe on a boss as Team D is making their way towards Lord and Lady Waycrest, bypassing Matron Alma, one of the most awful mobs to pull, so no reason to pull her as they're making their way towards the bottom part of the manor.
Yeah, Team D still has a fair bit of trash to go. The remainder of the dungeon's worth of trash is not enough, so they'll have to go up after Gorak Tool. But Black Mamba was just trying to go rolls to the wall there, and it didn't work for them, really. I mean, it was just... The pull died before it even started. The problem is Wong grabbed all of the trash he needed to grab. He dipped down to 50% health. The healer then dipped down to about 20-30% health while Wong was even getting in position to pull the boss, and I mean, the Quaking just kind of sealed the deal there. The pull died before it even took flight, unfortunately, as they come back and try yet again. 57% on the board for trash, 15 deaths as well. Raw has been pulled. They're likely going to proc their third reaping on top of it. I mean, they have to be hyper-aggressive to even try to catch up to Team D at this point, but there's just no way they're going to do it, as Team D has cleaned up all of the trash inside of Lord and Lady Waycrest room, has proc their fourth reaping with it, and I wouldn't be shocked if they pull this on top of the boss.
I don't think there's any way that Black Mamba does end up coming back from this, even with the most aggressive pulls that you could possibly do. It would take a major blunder from Team D. I'm pretty sure Team D could actually just pull one pack at a time, not even doing reaping with Lord and Lady Waycrest. They could actually just do it by itself, not even use their Bloodlust, and still probably end up beating them just because of how far ahead. 15 deaths, 3 full wipes on bosses. It's just so much time that ended up being lost there from Black Mamba, whereas Team D is hitting Lord Waycrest, making sure that they are DPSing him down efficiently while that reaping does stand on top of the tank here.
Yeah, Team D, I mean, really showing that the D doesn't stand for deplete, it stands for dominance. And just as I say that, unfortunately, Yu Monk gets hit by one of the swirlies that spawns from killing the Lost Soul, the green swirlies on the ground that do decrease your damage done by 10% per stack. He got hit by 2 of them somehow. They were overlapping, so I guess he didn't see them at all. So now he's sitting at a 20% damage reduction for 30 seconds. Certainly not enough for Black Mamba to catch up, but we'll slow them down a fair bit as Lady Waycrest has done her second round of siphoning her health over to Lord Waycrest. About to do her final one as Lord Waycrest has hit 35% again, and she will join the fight here for that second phase that we've seen several times throughout the weeks here. Black Mamba now has finally stabilized, has not actually procced their third reaping, but is at 20% on Raw.
Yeah, Long has actually been taking a lot of damage from these Wasting Strikes as well. You can, of course, actually spell reflect the Wasting Strikes, as you actually did see it come through here. It is a pretty considerable amount of damage to Lord Waycrest, as now they are dealing with both of the bosses. This is not like a necrotic setting, so these bosses aren't super scary for the tank, but it does end up doing a large amount of tank damage, so Long making sure that he ends up spell reflecting that Wasting Strike whenever it is in fact available to him every 25 seconds is very important. Very important
indeed, and they're looking for that more DPS efficient strategy right now, where they kind of cleave both of them down together rather than desperately getting Lord Waycrest down first, as most teams do, just because he does have that increased 3 stack of tank damage throughout the fight every time he gets that health siphoned into him. Lady Waycrest finally going down here. We will have the Gloom Horrors that are, I don't know why you keep calling them cats.
Dogs.
No, they don't look like cats or dogs. They're just some kind of weird aberration. Nonetheless, they do get pulled here on the side, all 7 of them, and they will be jumping up as Ab sits at the top, and they will be doing a round of hopefully well-coordinated crowd controls to make sure that all these jumps don't get on Ab, as I was just saying. Ab getting absolutely pillaged by these horrors. There's no Ring of Peace, no leg sweep, no shockwave. Finally, they overlap, actually, the shockwave and the leg sweep, so finally the Ring of Peace comes down, and after that it's going to have to be an Ursul's Vortex, and if they're not dead by then, well, the group will have to die, unfortunately, but Team D finally stabilizes and dodges a bullet there as Ab gets pummeled down to 3% health.
I don't actually know what was going on there. They would end up dealing with those dogs, Gloom Horrors, not super well. Most of the time you end up just seeing like an Ursul's Vortex go straight into a Ring of Peace, and that's all you really need for those Gloom Horrors. We have also seen teams in the past pull these Gloom Horrors into Gorak Tool, standing on like a ledge in order to be able to bait those jumps to where that they don't end up happening, but it does a lot of tank damage. It can actually be kind of scary, so Team D electing to take a little bit safer of a strategy here and just kind of pulling Gorak Tool by himself.
Yeah, and I should. Well, yeah, they don't have any extra trash to really pull with that. They have 9% on the board, so they're probably gonna have to port up after Gorak Tool and pull the kind of lodge area, the fireplace living room area, full of all the hunters and the mastiffs there. Black Mamba at 58%, looking to proc their third reaping wave. They have killed Rawl, they have killed Soulbound Goliath, but they still have a fair bit of trash to chew through. Something that Team D has efficiently combined with either Rawl or, of course, combined it with the fourth trash reaping wave with Lord and Lady Waycrest. Gorak Tool now 55%. Black Mamba just having a bit of struggles. Wong does not have access to his Zombie's Bargain trinket either. Yeah,
the healer actually ended up going down on the side of Black Mamba. I think he ended up getting healer threat from some of those maggots that Wong ended up pulling in the hallway just because of healing threat and skittish and other reasons, and he ends up like going down as soon as Wong ends up getting back in that courtyard area. Wong does end up getting battle res by the healer, and they might be able to salvage this pull, but it's just another blunder from them as 25 deaths have come through from Black Mamba. We're Team D here, deathless on Gorak Tool. While it might not be the fastest run we've ever seen, it's definitely deathless.
Definitely deathless indeed. Gorak Tool now down to 20%. Black Mamba just having so many struggles as the Residue goes down again, and Wong, not long for this world, goes down. Blue follows suit, one of the Reds follows suit, and Hank is unfortunately the only one alive, trying to run around with the spit debuffs, does not have anything for them, and he gets finished off by the remainder of that third reaping wave and a couple of the Magus that are still perusing the courtyard there. Team D now about to down Gorak Tool, and they'll have to run upstairs over to the lodge area and get finished with the trash and just put Black Mamba out of their misery for the rest of this map.
Yeah, they're going to want to step on the snake here, put the boot down. They're going to be running to pull some of these survivalists. We've actually seen teams wipe in the past to this survivalist pull because it can actually just be kind of scary because of their Serpent Sting cast. It can put a pretty substantial dot on group members, so making sure that you do end up getting that kicked is important. Team D honestly doesn't even have to pull this very aggressively. They could honestly wipe to this pack a bunch of times and still be okay, as Black Mamba here is still dealing with some of the maggots on their side, but Team D here pulling the survivalists and these marksmen here, just making sure to kite them around and get them grouped up.
I don't think they're even going to bother kiting them around as long as they bait the traps well and either somebody eats it with a cooldown or they just dodge to the side of them. We can see a couple of the explosive traps being eaten. Good Ring of Peace bump coming out of U-Monk there as Team D hits 93%. Looking to close off as soon as possible and take this first match. I mean, they're not even take. I mean, they just had the first match given to them at this point. The Black Mamba just really poor performance. They're now at 30 deaths on the board. I guess just trying to get some kind of record here for the remainder of this third East Cup. Team D, 95% and looking to close out the rest of the map.
Yeah, speaking of record, I'm pretty sure the record for deaths is like a 70-ish. So Black Mamba nowhere near that record, that death record. So maybe they want to start tying a little bit more here. Team D with the last survivalist mastiff pull that they need to before they end up getting to trash, and F gets freezing trap as he probably just tabbed out looking at Discord or looking at something else.
He's probably just going to make a sandwich at this point. Yeah. The team does finish it off here, and Black Mamba's poison has been sucked out of them, and it's not 1 million deaths, and just kind of clean up a lot of their play coming up. Both teams expectedly right out the gate are on the 9 mob pull with the 3 packs that are present in front of the stairs.
Yeah, we actually do see them making sure that they are able to actually kill that Enforcer as quickly as possible. One of the rogues actually got super low from the side of Team D. He might have got hit by that backhand, which is actually very bad. But making sure that you do get a lot of single target priority damage on the Enforcer is very important here because of the health disparity between that and the rest of the pack.
Yeah, and I mean, bolstering is certainly an affix that very hardly punishes you and works against you for being over-aggressive. It starts to become very counterproductive when you pull too much, just because the last mobs, you're never going to perfectly kill everything at the same time. The last mobs just start to accrue so much health from those bolstering buffs that you end up in a situation where you're just kiting a hyper-buffed mob around in circles that will one-shot the tank if you get near it, and it's just not very efficient. So nice, medium, quick pulls combined properly, and managing their health is the name of the game for bolstering.
Yeah, both teams here DPSing down that first pack very quickly, pulling it into this double Enforcer, double Mastiff pack. The Mastiffs, of course, have significantly less health than the Enforcers, so like we said, making sure that you do have coordinated DPS, making sure you're hitting the correct target the whole entire time is the name of the game. The Mastiffs, if they live for prolonged periods of time, can actually be kind of scary for your tank because they do end up enraging, but overall, this pack shouldn't be scary, especially for tanks that are prot warriors here.
Yeah, no, certainly not, and I'm surprised they didn't do the Mastiff damage thing, but Black Mamba 14% on the board. Team D has has beaten them to the 22% spawn of this first Reaping Wave, waiting for Sky Captain Craig to fall from the sky as he does just that, and they're engaging him for his phase 1. That does end at 75%. Finally, that heroism comes up for Team D right now as he does shoot random members of the team. Wong having a bit of trouble right now, though, as the bolstering hits from the Enforcers end up proccing his Bon Somebody's Bargain Trinket, so not going to have that available now for 6 minutes as they do their respective combination of that first Reaping Wave, along with Sky Captain Craig popping their heroism as well.
Yeah, making sure that they use the heroism, bloodlust, drums, whatever you want to end up calling it, whatever that buff is that gives them sated and gives them haste for a little bit is very important here, as you actually do see them, both teams doing mirrored pulls, getting that 20% Reaping, pulling it straight in the Sky Captain Crag. Once you do end up phasing Sky Captain Crag off his bird, he's normally a little bit more dangerous because of his Azerite powder shot. It'll end up doing a sizable amount of damage to the people that it ends up hitting, so making sure that you either outrange it if you are in fact a range, or making sure that you have a defensive available for you is very important.
Certainly we don't have many range present in these groups at all, as the rest of Druid does indeed go out and starts to bait the parrot poop coming down from the floating mount above. Now, it always moves in a clockwise circular pattern around the area and will occasionally poop down on the closest proximity target to it, so that's why the team positions here right in this spot, or at least around this exit area, so that the rest of Druid can be on the opposite side of the platform, not only to bait those, but also to be out of range and just have that 20% chance that hopefully that frontal Azerite powder shot does not hit anything except for, well, nothing but thin air, really.
Yeah, you actually do see Black Mamba getting some of that Parrot Guano on their melee. They have to kind of move Sky Cap and Crag, and you actually do see the rest of Druid trying to reposition to make sure he doesn't end up getting powder shot here, because if he actually does end up getting that powder shot comboed with that Guano, he could end up going down. You actually do see the Guano again going back in melee, so it's just a lot of damage lost, and it can actually be kind of scary for your melee DPS, because if they get hit with that Guano while the Azerite powder shot goes out, it can be dangerous for them. Team D about 10% ahead of Black Mamba here on Sky Cap and Crag, though.
And I mean, honestly, easy one-shot potential too. Combining the ×0 take of that Guano on the ground along with the Azerite powder shot is just huge amount of damage. You can see it just, the powder shot itself chunks players. I mean, sub 20% heal easily. Ab actually got hit there, so he got just a bit too close for the side of Team D, who's now at 15% on Sky Cap and Crag. Both teams, of course, at the 22% trash threshold with the exact same pulls done prior to the first boss. Now, after this, you know, Black Mamba, we know, goes over and does the Oarsman pull on the left of the long bridge after that one Enforcer that they're going to skip. I'm curious to see what Team D is going to do. I don't recall them doing any Oarsman pulls in previous weeks, but bolstering might dictate a completely different path coming up from them. Sky Captain Craig has finally keeled over for Team D, and they're getting ready to move over and skip that Enforcer. Yep,
and they're making their way towards the bridge area. Like you said, they're going to end up skipping that Enforcer, whether or not it's ending up grappling across the bridge, just kind of using a personal stealth. Maybe looking to use like a Shadow Meld or something else in order to be able to reset the Enforcer to where he just ends up standing back in the same spot, as U-Monk is the only one without like a personal stealth or way to get across that bridge. Black Mamba here has down Sky Captain Crag, and so they're looking to mirror the bridge cross that we did see from Team D. Team D, like you stated, they are pulling this Oarsman pack to the left side.
Indeed, Black Mamba doing the exact same skip across to the bridge, and they're going to wait for Blue to be the last person to traverse the bridge and grab aggro on that Enforcer, so that only one person in the group needs to use a Vanish/Shadow Meld, and the rest of the group can save that cooldown for later as needed, should it be an emergency situation or a plan that they have later on in the dungeon. We shall see. Team D now doing a good job to do a bump here on the rest of the trash, just to make sure that the Ring of Peace is used right before they bolster, and they finally use one of their mass stealths and go right through the middle of the area, making sure not to pull the Rat Trapper unless they want to. I mean, we don't worry about the small rats anymore. Of course, in previous patches they did bolster, but now there is no concern for those little ship rats doing just that. But the Rat Trapper is definitely the Vermin Trapper, a bit of a Lieutenant style mob, a lot higher health, very dangerous with these traps, as Ab does a good job to run around and clean up the floor.
Yeah, you actually do see Black Mamba electing to pull a little bit bigger pull here once they do traverse that bridge. They ended up pulling that Oarsman pack off to the side, but they ended up leaving the Oarsman sapped off to the side and just got the Duelists out of that pack in order to be able to get a little bit more count here. Maybe looking to proc their 40% Reaping and then pulling it straight into Council here in a couple seconds. Actually, they're going to end up proccing their Reaping. Okay, yeah. So they're going to end up pulling a couple of the mobs that are in front of Council of Captains, and they're going to end up pulling that Reaping right into the Council fight, whereas Team D here has to end up pulling a couple extra mobs off to the side, getting their Reaping, as they are prepared to pull Council of Captains with that 40% Reaping right now.
Yeah, one of the big restrictions that we see from teams on this map with bolstering now is that you see a lot of strats that revolve around combining some form of trash with either a high health mob like Ludwig von Tortolen later in the dungeon, or one of the bosses. Can't do that here with the bolstering. Bolstering does affect bosses as well, so the only thing you can really kind of efficiently combine with it is reaping, something that we've seen Team D do here for this on the left side of the screen. They've now combined the bosses down to 70% health, are doing well, of course, to move around the brews, the small brown swirlies, whether it be a negative or positive brew, affecting the players or the bosses.
Yeah, a lot of the time you want to see some of the teams pull trash into these bosses just because of those brews that they have been getting for a lot of the time. Basically, the brews will end up giving you haste crit, or will end up doing a dot to you, so you only want to get the haste and crit, and then they will end up pulling the mobs into the brews once they end up downing one of the Council of Captains bosses. But on this bolstering week, they can't really do that, as Black Mamba has proc their 40% reaping, and they're looking like they're just like kind of standing around here, maybe waiting to get threat on Wong with all the reaping mobs before they do pull this in the Council of Captains. So just a little bit of time wasted here.
Yeah, well, what they did is a lot of the reaping that spawned was a fair bit away because they killed the trash near the bridge. So by the time the rest of them got there, they actually ended up killing some more trash. They killed the trash off perfectly, and as the main part of the reaping came in, they had the trash dead and were ready to pull the boss. So actually fairly well timed here by Black Mamba, and certainly a better caliber compared to the version of them we saw in Waycrest Manor right now, as Captain Jolly and Raoul are at about 80% apiece for Black Mamba. Unlike Team D, though, who Captain Jolly is just dipping sub 10%, Captain Raoul still at 25. They only have 40% trash on the board versus Black Mamba's 49. That's about one larger pull's worth of percent in this dungeon. So the team's fairly neck and neck right now, and Black Mamba can certainly make up a bit of ground by playing well around those brews. I mean, we keep saying it, but the key to this fight is really how well you play with the brews.
Yeah, but so while they are like one trash pulls trash ahead of Team D, they're definitely not 60% of boss health ahead of Team D here, just with how much trash they ended up doing on the front after that bridge pack. You do see Team D here doing a double pull here, pulling these harpooners here with this patrol pack that's off to the side, just making sure that they're able to get stuns and interrupts out whenever those do end up having to come out, making sure that the blind rage ends up getting paralysis or gouge like you did see on the side of Team D is also important, whereas Black Mamba is getting both Jolly and Raoul evenly cleaved down to 44%.
Yeah, the problem with the side of Team D there is they actually so desperately mass stunned that blind rage before it actually ended up channeling after the cast that they used 2 pistol shots on it and the shockwave, and they all hit it before it finished the cast of blind rage, so it just recast it right after. But luckily they had the gouge available to them, so a bit of desperate lack of coordination as Umunk dips right to 1% health on the side there, dodges death barely as Team D mounts up, gets out of dodge right now, and Stealth's getting ready to go over to the Ring of Booty, whilst Black Mamba is still working on the Council of Captains. About 18% average health between the 2 remaining captains right now, looking to down Jolly first, just slightly over Raoul, so their damage balance is certainly a bit more efficient than Team D's was, as Captain Raoul is about 15 to 17% different on the side of Team D, whilst Black Mamba only has about a 4 to 5% spread between the 2 of them. Wouldn't be surprised after this, of course, to see once again Wong and the 3 DPS, as we've seen in the previous freeholds for them, pull their own trash pack whilst the Resto Druid runs over and starts the event in the Ring of Booty.
Yep, and that's actually something that you did see from the side of Team D. Umunk actually dropped incredibly low as Ab was actually just off to the side, starting that RP and getting lightning spawned, the pig that you do need to end up grabbing here in just a couple seconds. Black Mamba here, using their shroud, they're making their way towards that Ring of Booty area. Lightning is already spawned for them. You're going to see them all walk up, grab it at the same time. So good for them in order to be able to skip a lot of the RP associated with that, where Team D has procced their 60% reaping and is elected to pull it right on top of Ludwig.
Yeah, once again, I mean, the same scenario as the Council of Captains. You can only really combine reaping with Ludwig. He has such a high amount of health, this mini-boss, that you don't want to bolster him. He already does a substantial amount of damage to the tank, or at least can do a substantial amount of damage to the tank, and just is such a health sponge. So last thing you need is buffing him with more health. 66% trash on the side of Team D. Black Mamba about to proc their 3rd reaping and carry that over into Ludwig as well. I mean, you nailed it earlier, Tattles. Like, the 60% difference in boss between the 2 of them was not enough to make up for that 8-9% advantage that Black Mamba had. They're only now grabbing their reaping over to Ludwig von Tortolen, something that Team D is now at about 15% on, so they're starting to pull a bit further and further ahead.
Yeah, and you actually do see Team D here pulling some of the trash, this Brute and this Knife Juggler right on top of Ludwig. So even though, like you said, Ludwig is a health sponge, once Ludwig did get about sub 40-ish%, they elected to pull a little bit more trash on top of him just to have some efficient cleave. Cleave. The Knife Juggler and the Brute don't do too terribly much, but you do see Ludwig go down. The Brute and the Knife Juggler do get a bolstering stack on both of those mobs, but it was just efficient cleave. I mean, it's just efficient cleave, and it will end up getting them closer to their 4th Reaping at the instance, which they might end up pulling with Trothak. I'm not entirely sure here, as they are making their way to pull some more of the trash, though. So they're going to get that.
That's exactly what they're going to do. I mean, they only have 10% left before that 80% break point, so they're going to do that, especially because there's nothing to really do right now while Trothak is spawning. It takes about 25 seconds for that role playing of Trothak to spawn. We can kind of see it in the top left of the corner, top of the screen right now from the observers on Team D side as he ominously kind of waddles into that ring of booty. Team D making sure to cleave everything down at the same time just to not have something that's too over bolstered with health. Black Mamba 71% trash on the board. It looks like they have actually pulled a 4-pack on top of Ludwig van Tol'Dagor, so slightly more aggressive than we saw from Team D, but also requiring extra management to not bolster anything too much.
Yeah, you actually do see Team D kind of bolster those 2 scrappers there for a second, so it just ends up costing them a little bit more time than they otherwise would have liked to have spent, but they do end up proccing the Reaping. It's also important to note that Ludwig van Tol'Dagor also turns into a Reaping mob, and whenever you do have these Reaping mobs, it will take 50% of the mob's health and convert it into the Reaping mob, so that Ludwig van Tol'Dagor Reaping will end up being around for a while here. Making sure that you end up dodging out of the shadow smashes is very important.
Yeah, but really, as long as you do that, it's really not a big deal. He doesn't do anything else for the rest of the fight, and it certainly should not hinder your damage on Trothak. I mean, Trothak's melee hitbox is large enough, especially with the rogue Azerite traits, large enough that you're not going to be affected by the lost soul of Ludwig van Tol'Dagor. Black Mamba here has proc their 4th Reaping trash as well and pulled it similarly on top of Trothak, but 20% behind on the boss.
Yeah, they've definitely caught up in terms of like what they ended up doing with their trash with Ludwig, and then how they ended up dealing with that pack after Ludwig. Of course, Team D ended up having just a little bit of minor issues with their bolstering stacks, with how long that pack ended up lasting before they could end up engaging Trothak. So Black Mamba is definitely closer, but they're still 20% on the boss behind here, so that's definitely not what they're looking to do.
No, they're looking to win this match, Tettles, and stay alive in this bracket right now, try to rack up as many points as they can before land, but Team D here just looking too dominant right now as Trothak does hit 57% for them. The Lost Soul is about to fall over, and they'll just have a clean sweep of Trothak, hopefully, leading up to Harlan's Sweet. Black Mamba still at 72%. They just can't seem to close this 20-ish, 18 to 20% gap between the 2 bosses, and truthfully, it is hard to make up just magically a ton of single target damage on this boss. You have the rogues that can stay on the side of that Shark Tornado because of their Azerite traits. You have the tank that's just going to eat it to the face. You can block the whirls, but really, you can only get so much extra damage out of this boss. You just have to grind through it and hope that you can make it up with some creativity on trash later, which is further hard to do because of the bolstering.
I mean, they're starting to kind of bridge the gap, maybe just with a little bit better play, maybe with the 5 roll or something like that coming through, but because rogues do have some RNG to their kit just because of how their roll the bones ends up working out. So, but it's not going to be like 15% of the boss difference, but overall both teams here DPSing down Trothak, not having too many issues here. Both of the Wrestler Druids making sure that they're kiting the sharks around super well, as we do see Ab here kiting this Sawtooth Shark through those pools, getting him slowed or stopped there, and then Ab dips into melee range of Trothak in order to be able to dot him back up, and then he'll end up kiting the shark back around. So this is actually very good from both Wrestler Druids here. Yeah,
I mean, it's looking great, and Team D has actually made the gap even larger, likely because they just had access to their second round of cooldowns here. So something that we're going to see kind of reclosed by Black Mamba. So we're probably going to have Team D kill Trothak at around the 18 to 20% mark for Black Mamba's Trothak kill. Team D now just rearing up, moving out of what is likely the last Shark Tornado. And, you know, Tettles, I don't know, Black Mamba there's only so much, like I mentioned, creativity you can do with the trash at the end of the dungeon, and they certainly can't just pull tons of it on top of Harlan's Sweet at the end. The only thing they can really do is try to time a perfect cannonball barrage, as Harlan's Sweet is at like 1 or 2% health, and kill off a bunch of trash that way, but even that is kind of sketchy.
No, they would definitely need a mistake from Team D here, as Team D does down Trothak the Shark Puncher, and they end up making their way towards Harlan's Sweet here. Team D would actually just have to make such a major blunder here in order for Black Mamba to be able to catch back up, and the reason for that being is just how far ahead they are. You actually do see Black Mamba here downing Trothak, and it's going to be about a 30-second differential, so Team D would end up having to like wipe to Harlan's Sweet, end up having maybe multiple deaths, would end up being able to catch them back up, just because there is a 0 death differential between the two teams, so maybe just a couple deaths coming through could end up making the difference that Black Mamba needs over Team D, but overall, you do see Team D here kind of dealing with some of this trash here as this Ravager is going to end up casting his Painful Motivation in a couple seconds. Team D is actually dealing with a lot of their Painful Motivation casts here, making sure that they do end up getting good CC out in order to be able to get the Painful Motivation on all the mobs that they need. They're likely to not proc their last Reaping of the Instance. They're probably only going to get this trash to about 92-ish percent, but make sure that they're going to get the last of it with Harlan Sweet's Cannonball Barrage right at the very end of Harlan Sweet. So that was actually very good by Team D, making sure all the rogues and everybody else ends up shadow melting off that extra trash that they do have, while Black Mamba at 93% are making their way to Harlan Sweet as well.
This is actually very cool.
This is actually going to be super close.
Yeah, it is very super close. And Team D neck and neck, if you will, Tettles. That was actually really cool to see from Team D, just triple coordination there. Both rogues just off on their own, dealing with 3 packs, Ravagers +2, and then the tank dealing with 1 as well, killing everything simultaneously. Now, Black Mamba had the advantage that they were already 3% above on trash, so they only needed to deal with 2 Ravager packs, and now the teams sit only 2% apart on trash. Harlan Sweet pulled at virtually the same time for both teams right now, as Team D just hitting that 84% mark, Black Mamba following suit, and it's all going to come down really to how they handle the trash towards the end of the boss. Black Mamba does have to make up 2 extra percent over Team D, but this is going to be a close one. Yeah,
aggressively pulling these Cannonball Barrages towards the end of the fight is definitely going to be the name of the game here. A lot of the time you have a little bit more leeway in terms of when you pull the Cannonball Barrages into the boss, and we see teams pulling like a lot of the trash into Harlan Sweet just because of the Cannonball Barrages doing damage to that trash. But with this bolstering affix, aggressively pulling trash with the Cannonball Barrage is going to make or break it here. It's going to definitely be neck and neck, like you said.
It's going to be close. Oh, Tettles. It's going to be close, but Black Mamba is actually pulling slightly ahead on the boss, and this is a tyrannical setting, so Harlan Sweet does have a lot of health. They finally entered phase 2 right now at 60%, where he will mimic all of his abilities, of course, 360 degrees on that slicing when we see it right here, and then giving the Cannonball Barrage to all members of the team except for the tank, which we see right here. Why, thank you very much, game, for the perfect RNG description as I was describing the fight. Harlan Sweet down to 52%. Team D trying to keep that gap nice and close, as they're only 2 to 3% behind the team, doing well to move out on the bridge with that Cannonball Barrage. Black Mamba just trying to whatever they can to maintain the lead here, and I mean, Tettles, I'm really curious to see who's going to pull trash when and how they're going to deal with it, because that's all it's really going to come down to. I mean, 2 to 3% on this boss is a fair bit, but we're only talking about 5 seconds here.
Yeah, bolstering Harlan Sweet would actually just be like what ends up making the difference here. If you actually are pulling aggressively with the Cannonball Barrages into Harlan, and you end up bolstering him at like 1 or 2%, it could end up taking just a little bit more time than you necessarily need, whereas if the other team ends up having like a perfect kill, or ends up actually killing Harlan before they end up getting a lot of damage from the Cannonball Barrage, it could actually be detrimental to the team. But we do see a 3% difference between 2 teams. It's also important to note that we also have a 0 death differential, as both teams have had a deathless run so far.
Yeah, and important to note as well is that we're about to go into the last phase here of Harlan Sweet right now, so he's going to be taking 100% increased damage and dealing, attacking 100% faster on the tank, but who cares, because he barely does any damage on the tank in the first place. So Black Mamba is going to start chewing through his health really quicker right now, and they're getting ready to do the final Harlan shuffle as they move over from the corner of this deck right now. We're going to have all eyes on the trash nearby, likely the double Enforcer pack that both teams are just ominously sitting beside. 11% on Harlan Sweet right now for Black Mamba. They have had the Cannonball Barrage, and Team D has their own Cannonball Barrage right now. And here comes the aggressive trash pull from Black Mamba, grabbing everything together, slicing wind, punts the teams all in every which direction. Volcanoes plague the ground right now, and here's the final cannonballs coming in for Black Mamba as they try not to bolster Harlan Sweet too much. Huge amount of damage coming in for both sides of them. Harlan Sweet does go down, and the Enforcers are just about to fall here, but Team D following suit right now. Cannonballs going all over the place, and they didn't get enough damage on the trash as Black Mamba looks to try and close out this game and tie the series 1-1.
Yep, they're going to be downing this Enforcer in just a couple seconds here, as Black Mamba does get 100% trash count and ends up tying it up the series.
That was right off the bat. Are going to get ready, of course, to shroud at least the majority of the trash. We'll have to see if they end up pulling any of the crab packs on the way in. Straight to Sand Queen right now. Black Mamba indeed. Wong grabs one of the rich dials, if you will, on the side of the room, along with the silt crabs, and immediately pop their bloodlust. So won't have access to that for after the first upheaval. So they will lose a bit of bloodlust uptime on the Sand Queen. Team D doing similar.
Yeah, Team D also pulls some of these Vice Jaws in. Black Mamba ends up pulling a few different Vice Jaws. Of course, not ending up using their Shroud there, as you just you did just see Wong just kind of jumping in. Bloodlust popped at the exact same time. This is going to be actually just very close from both teams. I don't expect to see any deaths coming through. The Sand Queen can be kind of scary from time to time if you do end up getting comboed with the Enrage from the buzzing drone dying, plus that upheaval, but overall we shouldn't see that from these teams.
Yeah, upheaval is particularly scary when it's on a tank as well, just because of the massive magic hit, but on top of it, she actually melees the tank as she comes up. She melees her current aggro target, so you get upheaval plus melee, so if any of those raging mobs were around as well, it could have been quite detrimental for Wong, who is the one who ate the brunt of that first upheaval. Both teams at just about to hit that 50% mark. Black Mamba actually slightly ahead of Team D, 5% trash on the board. Team D's versus Team D's 6, as both teams of course move around very well to bait these sand traps nearby players, group them up nicely for a quick efficient cleave, and get rid of those enraged stacks quickly on the Sand Queen.
Yeah, Ab is doing a really good job of making sure that he's in melee the whole entire time, so when those sand traps do end up getting spawned, they are in melee, so they're actually able to just really quickly get hit. You actually do see Umunk popping his dampen harm there, making sure that he does have a defensive available. You can actually transcend that upheaval if you're a little bit quick enough, or you can roll it if you are quick, but Umunk electing to take the more safer approach, eating the full upheaval there. And then Black Mamba here, it looks like they're actually getting incredible. They got kind of low there for a second. We're able to actually just kind of recover here, but the Sand Queen is starting to go down quicker for Team D.
Yeah, and you know, the reason I was kind of grimacing as you were looking at my face there is because Blue actually got so low. He just had so many stacks from the parasites and the drones coming in because they pulled the trash on top of this, and then we had, of course, we're in that enraging, so once the trash hits 30%, it'll deal 100% increased damage, so Blue unfortunately ate the brunt of some of those enraged stacks as well. Umunk taking a fair bit of damage here, but no death on the side of Team D, as they have surpassed Black Mamba's damage, 8% trash on the board, and have killed off the Sand Queen first. Black Mamba following suit only seconds later will head over to the sewer as well. I like to see this out of Team D. We talked about it earlier. Just skip the parasite. Both sides actually just skipping the parasites, heading straight upstairs, and just as quickly as possible are going to try to get up to Jess Hallis's floor. They're going to, at some point very soon, pop their Shadow Meld and just start working at the trash on Jess Hallis's floor.
Yeah, Ab actually was electing to use Mass Entangle in this instance, so he was actually able to get all of those mobs rooted up, whereas the healer on the side of Black Mamba looks like he's electing to use Typhoon here, according to the tool that we do have available for us, powered by Wowhead as well. So making sure that you, while Ab ended up Mass Entangling those mobs there, they are just able to quickly get past them and make sure that they do end up getting them Shadow Melted off quickly. Team D here pulling some of these C Speakers and the Arsonists here, just making sure that they do get a lot of the count here. They're probably going to be looking to pop their, get their first Bloodlust procced here, and then they end up pulling it into Jess Hallis, whereas Black Mamba in a similar situation with their trash count and what they should be looking to do here for Jess.
Yeah, similar pulls coming out here. Black Mamba just on barely nipping at the heels of Team D right now, as both do the same pull with the double C Speaker pull at the start here, making sure to mitigate as many of those Salt Blasts as possible to do a tremendous amount of damage to the tank. We can see that there's a 5-stack from the Arsonist right now on long, as finally Ab decides to dispel him, as to not let the damage get too out of hand, with Enraging finally starting to hit on those mobs. Good Ursul's Vortex there from Team D's Ab coming in, making sure that these mobs that flee in terror when they're low percentage do not get too far from the pack so that they can efficiently cleave them down. Black Mamba 12% on the board, looking to finish up what they can worth of trash, proc their first reaping, and I do expect that they'll do something similar and try to pull Jess Hallis through that wall.
These Arsonists for Team D are actually just super annoying whenever they are fleeing in terror, whenever they do get low health. It looks like Black Mamba's just had a little bit more clean of a pull whenever they are dealing with these, and they're going to be looking to wipe them up in just a couple more seconds. They do have a couple more these Iron-Tide Raiders with their pack, whereas Team D just has some of the Arsonists left to them. But it looks like Black Mamba, even though they were a little bit behind in terms of trash count, they're looking to kill this pack at the same time as Team D. Team D here proccing their reaping, standing on one of these like little ledges in order to be able to get some of those Vice Jaws and those little crabs that are from outside on top of them, and they're looking to probably pull Jess through the wall here in just a couple seconds.
Yeah, they've actually already done it. Black Mamba pulling Jess Hallis first, along with the first Reaping Wave, finishing off the Raiders from inside the cage that they opened earlier, so that Jess Hallis does not open as many mobs that they need to babysit for the explosive in the second phase when Jess hits 70%. Will, of course, run back through the wall and open only the far cages where the players are not intending to go. Now, hopefully they don't have any issues with some of the proximity aggro that could occur on the C Speakers on the far side of the Water Dome that are fighting the Warden, and hopefully they don't get too unlucky spawns worth of the orbs that are coming in. So the orbs are what you need to watch out for on this fight, depending on the amount of trash that's coming into them. They do need to be babysat quite quite ludicrously, if you will. And the problem is when there's a combination of flashing daggers and an orb that you need to go kill as a flashing is coming out, could be pretty detrimental to the group. There's an orb on the far side there. The team's going to hopefully do well to line of sight it. Actually, somebody managed to kill it right before it became a problem. Bobby finally has spawned here for Black Mamba, as Just Hallis has done the entire round of the floor and returned back to the team. Team D only now proccing their phase and having Jess run off. So Black Mamba has moved nicely ahead. They're 3% behind on trash, but that doesn't even matter with the cannons coming up.
Yeah, and the reason that they ended up pulling so far ahead is because of how Team D ended up dealing with their reaping. They ended up doing their reaping just kind of by itself, maybe with 1 or 2 raiders, whereas Black Mamba ended up just pulling that reaping straight into Jess here. Team D just taking the slow and steady approach here of how they're going to end up doing Jess with a significantly more safe approach. But like you said, it's just propelled Black Mamba into the lead here, as Jess is down to 45% for Black Mamba, where it's only down to 58 for Team D. Team D having to deal with some of these raiders and some of these arsonists that Jess did end up getting out of the cages there. I actually think they ended up pulling some of the arsonists from that far side. That's what you kind of saw them doing. They ended up just walking forward there in order to be able to get efficient DPS on Jess, so they didn't just like kind of stand there waiting for him to run to them, and pulling those arsonists on top of them.
Yeah, going Kitty Foreman, sinking his claws into all of those explosives, doing really well there as 2 or 3 spawned with all those arsonists coming in as well. So just making sure that nothing spirals out of hand for Team D, as Black Mamba is maintaining about a 12 to 14% lead over Team D right now, but they're kind of rocketing back as quickly as they can. Just Hallis now dipping sub 20% HP as a Ring of Peace defensively comes in for the striker on the side, making sure that they cleave it down with everything. Arsonist in there as well, of course, in that enraged setting, but has been soothed by Ab just to make sure not too much damage goes on along, especially in this fortified environment. That would be a huge amount, but here we go. Exactly what I was talking about. A poor line of sight coming out of one of the rogues on the side of Team D. Procs the cheat death, something that's not going to be available now for 6 minutes, and the biggest problem with that is the rogues are the one handling the cannons upstairs, and they're going to be prone to damage, not only from mobs so they fails the tricks of the trade, but also issues with orbs spawning. I mean, they're vulnerable to explosives when you're in the cannon. You're not just magically immune to damage. Black Mamba has dealt already with Just Hallis and is moving up to the cannon. Yeah,
Black Mamba is just a little bit ahead and getting to the cannon just a little bit quicker here. I actually think you saw one of the explosives go off on the side of Team D from that striker that was just kind of standing there throwing that rock. The other rogue from the side of Team D ended up proccing his cheat death there, as he is on the far side. He was just taking damage from one of the packs that maybe he didn't use his vanish on. As you see Team D here shrouding the rest of the group all the way through, as they probably did get some of the tricks of the trade off on Long before they end up making their way to the cannon. Long, of course, standing in that middle bridge area, as you see him running around, popping his life for potion, grabbing some of the trash, and pulling it back towards that cannon area. It's very important that that both of these teams end up keeping all of their explosives and most of that trash inside of that kind of that room out in the back, just because of how the explosives can be line of sighted.
Huge pull coming in here from Wong on the side of Black Mamba. We know he basically pulls the entire floor, as the officer on the side is now riot shielding. The crowd control has finally worn off on Black Mamba for the officer, along with the gunner that sits there. I think the gunner has actually already been killed, so the officer has been rooted just outside of reach of the cannon, so really well done by them. The problem is he keeps spawning explosives, but they're tending to it just with some light ranged attacks with the Crackling Jade Lightning coming in from blue, and of course any cast from the healer as well. Here comes finally the second reaping wave on the side of Black Mamba. We do know one of the rogues went to the far side, and they're doing kind of a double pincer strat once again to make sure that cannons are hitting from both sides, but explosives starting to go off now, and everything is unraveling and spiraling out of control for Black Mamba as one of the rogues goes down. Did not have access to that cheat death, and huge amounts of damage coming in on Wong, as right now the entire battlefield is littered with explosives. The cannon finally is manned again by one of the rogues, looking to delete the rest of the trash. Hank has popped his cheat death as well. Wong is so many stacks from the reaping and just can't get a dispel from the healer, as his Bond Zombie's trinket has pocked now, and they're running around in circles trying to line of sight some of these explosives as the cannon cleans up the rest of the trash. Finally, the Ring of Peace goes down from blue defensively on Wong. That was a clutch Ring of Peace and saved their tank's health, but blue unfortunately got sacrificed in return, but they managed to stabilize. Unfortunately, they're now on the cusp of proccing their 4th reaping, so they're not going to be able to get that res on blue anytime soon.
It doesn't really matter because he's not doing most of the damage there. Of course, he's not going to have that Ring of Peace available for a little while, as it is on cooldown, so that's pretty bad. That's exactly what we were talking about, though, in terms of like letting the mobs get out of that that pavilion area and running astray into the room. You end up having explosives just kind of spread out everywhere, and the mobs aren't able to get controlled very easily, as they do just kind of run around. It got super hectic there with the Reaping and everything else. Ideally, you'd like the Reaping to just kind of be tanked away from the Rogue. The Rogue continued to be DPSing down the officers and the other normal mobs, while the rest of the group is just DPSing down the Reaping there pretty easily. You actually do see Ab here using that Mass Entangle there. 2 explosives end up going off, and that could have actually just been so dangerous for Team D. Black Mamba, though, is so far ahead here, about to pull Knight Captain Valyria here at 93% count, where Team D still at 77%, so this is so bad for them.
77%, but I mean, the cannons are going to make quick work of trash. They do have another 10% in favor because of the sloppiness from Black Mamba with the deaths there, but you're right, Tettles, they did dodge a bullet there. Remember, both rogues do not have access to the cheat death because of the issues that they had skipping up to the cannon area in the first place. Another explosive goes off on the side of Team D. Nothing too detrimental, of course. The team only dips to around 60% HP. Ab able to just heal over, hot everyone up, healing over time, and make sure that they're healthy with no more explosives going off as the cannon focuses on the trash on the right side on the way to Captain Valyria, and the tank rounds up the Reaping. Cannon finally starts to pay attention to that, as long as a lot of stacks finally gets dispelled by Ab, and Black Mamba doing a masterful job of dealing with Knight Captain Valyria so that it's positioned well in the corners, that the melee have access to DPSer at all times.
Yeah, Knight Captain Valyria here down to 50%. And you actually see, what? The Rogue just ends up running it before the tank. He doesn't have tricks on the tank, and he ends up getting meleeed and dying? What was that?
That was unlucky. So Team D just kind of thwarting any advantage that they had with the 2 deaths, closing that death difference down to 1 now. The Rogue just runs in, absolutely just gets dumpstered in the face by the boss. Does not have a cheat death active on the tank, or the tank was too slow. Whatever it may be, it led to a silly death and the battle res that needed to come out of that. But Black Mamba also has 0 battle reses available on the board, and I mean, Korgus, we keep talking about how dangerous he is. Certainly we're in a fortified environment, so not as dangerous nearly, but things can go wrong on that boss very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, you would have to see a lot of doubles just from the explosive blast on Overseer Korgus. In previous weeks, we've seen some really nasty effects, like Quaking paired with Tyrannical here, so that would actually just be super scary for the teams. But with the pretty much non-effects on Overseer Korgus, I don't think we're likely to see a wipe, especially since Black Mamba does also have access to that Bloodlust or the drums here, as they have down Knight Captain Valyria and they're making their way on Overseer Korgus. Team D here, 50% health still left on Knight Captain Valyria, so this is looking very bad for a team that we expect to be the 2nd seed from the East region after maybe taking a loss here from Black Mamba.
I mean, I'm shocked and or appalled, but we're not done just yet, as Hank eats one of the Warden hits to the face there. Now, the Wardens naturally move slower because they have an aura, but also do a tremendously larger amount of damage, physical damage, so Hank kind of dodged a bullet there. If he got a crit, he would have keeled over and died. Nonetheless, no deaths there. He does manage to pull it to the side, vanish, and Black Mamba gets started here, popping their drums, their heroism, getting ready on Overseer Korgus, chewing through this fortified boss as quickly as possible, and praying that they don't have too many doubles.
Yeah, so basically doubles occur whenever the boss does... what a double basically is whenever the boss ends up casting 2 explosive blasts like very close to one another, and it can actually be very difficult to recover just because of the time interval in between the casts. And it's actually occurring on screen right here. You actually did see the explosive burst, then you actually did see the Overseer Korgus end up casting that Azerite rounds cast, and then he'll end up casting that explosive burst again. And you can see, you can actually notice it if you're watching the Deadeye shot. If immediately following the Deadeye shot, if that explosive burst does end up coming out, you will end up getting a double.
Yeah, so a bit unlucky here for Black Mamba, but they seem to be handling quite well right now as they rotate properly with the Deadeye shot right now, as I believe Blue eats it there, or one of the rogues eats it. There's no debuff on him right now, so he might have dodged or parried it, or actually just dodged it. In this case, Overseer Korgus is now down to 50%. Team D has rushed upstairs as well, pulled Overseer Korgus just down to 90% now. They've popped their Bloodlust, of course, as well, and are looking to try and catch up desperately, but there's just no way they're going to be able to at this point unless Black Mamba has just, frankly, a full team wipe at this point.
Yeah, Black Mamba's actually been blazing through this dungeon. We actually saw some of one of the fastest times in time trials was like right at 14-ish minutes. It was about 14:10 or so. Black Mamba is looking to try to like match a similar time here. They're probably going to be in the 14:30 to 15-ish minute range, while Team D here just having some of the issues earlier on in the instance with how they ended up doing Jess like super slow with not pulling it with a Reaping and just making a more conservative side. But the tank for Black Mamba just went down.
And they don't have a battle available. I just mentioned it's not available for 6 minutes right now. So they're going to try to kill Overseer Korgus for the remaining quarter of health. They're committing to this idea, but they don't have the kind of cooldowns required to survive 25%. As Blue goes down as well, the healer is about to go down. There is no way they are doing this boss without the tank for a quarter HP, so they're going to have to just succumb to the idea and have a full team wipe right now as Sours bows his head in shame into his hands. Team D looking to pounce and capitalize on this wipe here from Black Mamba. The rest of the match has been handed to them, and it looks like Team D is going to squeeze by on this one.
Alexa, cue sound music. Team D here, 30% left available for them on Overseer Korgus. They would definitely need, basically Ab would end up having to die here for them to be able to lose this match, because Ab is the only available battle res for them just because he is that Druid class. And with Overseer Korgus at 20%, they might even be able to do this without a healer from this point on.
If the healer dies here, they would be fine. If the tank dies here, maybe that's a different story, but it doesn't really matter. Team D has 89% trash on the board. That's just enough to make it up with the remaining 5 mobs that are on the balcony behind Korgus. Korgus now single digit, 6% left, 6% health left for Korgus as they're preparing to down the boss and head back over to the cannon. Black Mamba, nothing but trouble again as 2 more deaths plague them on their run back up to Korgus. This was unlucky.
Yeah, Team D here with 89%, so they just need a couple more mobs with the cannon here in just a couple seconds. But Black Mamba here going to be looking to pull Overseer Korgus in just a couple more seconds as Wong has positioned and is getting ready for Overseer Korgus to spawn before they do end up pulling it. Team D is getting just these couple priestesses in position, looking to kill these Ashveen Wardens as well with the cannon.
Yeah, I mean, this is, like, what a shame. I mean, what a throw from Black Mamba. It's just, you know, they had such a good, clean run up until now. Just a bit of sloppiness in the cannon area. They managed to recover it, but, I mean, just what a throw. Overseer Korgus, 25%, and the tank goes down. I'm not exactly sure what he got hit by. I'm going to assume that it was the pattern on the ground, of course, but that's all. Performance this week, and Team D certainly not the Team D we've grown to love in the past few weeks, but nonetheless both teams out the get-go here are pulling the rather aggressive pull at the start that we've actually seen claim the lives of healers and tanks, quite many in both of the cups, both regions of the cups. And right off the bat, there we go, we see Umunk already falling on the side of Team D.
Yeah, we actually see Battle for Champion Jack using Tree Form and Tranquility, using both of the strong 3-minute cooldown straight at the get-go here on this very first difficult pull, as you mentioned. On top of Grievous, you also have teaming, so there's of course more mobs that you need to pull at the very start too. And I just want to mention that this is a time trial dungeon, and both those teams got the number 1 plus the number 2 spot, and there were only a fraction of a second between those two teams. So 18 minutes, 39 seconds for both of the teams.
That is quite the conundrum, as Battle for Champion is now at 13% trash, heading over to the Mask. Both of them likely will be proccing their first Reaping Wave into Elderly Axe of the first boss. Team D here just a bit behind right now as they're still chewing through the Matron trash here. They're focusing damage on the Blood Priest, wanting to make sure they kill that before dragging the rest of the trash over to the Mask. Double Blood Priest is an absolute nightmare, and it's very easy to miss one of the Dark Reconstitution casts, which will heal one of the random mobs up to max health. So if you have that happen on the Matron or especially the Mask, it's going to lead to a team wipe. So the team's playing it a bit safe here. A lot of damage coming in on the Ab right now, though, just dips to 6% health and manages to stabilize, though.
It's just so much damage on the healers here, as they're the only range, and they're baiting the charge from the Matron on them all the time. And then on top of that, you get the Spears cast from the other mobs, from the Headhunters, and you also get the net, which also does damage. You can shapeshift out of the net to avoid the damage from it, but there's so many abilities to cast, and shapeshifting is a global cooldown that you don't always can spend if you have to heal the tank.
Both teams doing the exact same thing, proccing that Reaping and running over to the boss. Tanks making sure that they jump in front quickly to get that first free spell reflect on the boss, chunking health down by around 3-4%, so a huge amount of damage reflected there. Battle for Champion did beat them to the chase, though, and has their Bloodlust popped about 6 seconds prior to Team D. Both teams will have to make sure that they dodge around the Shadow Smashes from the Lost Souls, and especially the Green Swirlies. We've seen a lot of teams constantly get hit by these Green Swirlies today. Certainly don't want that damage reduction with how tightly raced these two teams are going to be.
Hey, definitely gonna watch out now. One problem is that you, of course, need to constantly interrupt the effigy and the boss. So if you get swirlies on top of them, at some point you just have to take the swirly and interrupt, because it's, of course, more you need to interrupt it, because if it's not, then the tank might just get one-shot by one of those casts. So you definitely, that's why the Reaping on top of it is a little bit dangerous, but both of those teams did manage to finish up the Reaping waves now. And one thing to note as well is that if you have those ranged Reaping souls that constantly cast Grave Bolts, it might take the spell reflect from the tank if it's being casted on him, and then he can't spell reflect the Blood Bolt anymore, as Luke almost got one-shot by one of the casts going through.
Yeah, I mean, Long just completely misplayed his Spell Reflect there. It's only a 5-second duration. He popped it way too early, so it actually wore off by the time the Blood Bolt went through and chunked him down. It actually did kill him, technically. He did proc his Blunsomni's Bargain Trinket, so he's not going to have that available for the dangerous amount of trash coming up in Kragmaw's room right now. So huge misplay there by Long. They managed to dodge a bullet, though. One death on the board still for them. They haven't used that Battle Res, of course. That was earlier in the dungeon with Umont going down. Battle for Champion just cruising on through right now as they down Elderly Axa and get ready to move on and stealth into Kragmaw's room.
Yeah, so we see this Shroud coming out for most of the teams here just because on teaming you have a triple maggot pack here that you really don't want to deal with. So that's why we see the Shroud coming out straight into Kragmaw's room, and now we see those big pulls. Now we've seen teams struggle with these pulls before as the healers die to the fixates and getting aggro, so definitely got to watch out for these pulls because there's so many mobs that are dangerous and need to be controlled and interrupted and stunned.
Swarmers are especially on the danger list here right now. They have the Sonic Screech that will do a pulsing AoE damage and also interrupt spell casting. Not to mention, of course, we also have the flowers there that need to have their Decaying Mind interrupted. We have just the Goose area denial on the ground. We have the Magus with their frontal as well. So certainly a lot of babysitting needed here, as Nagura stated, but definitely the Bloodstormer is the most dangerous of them because the tank just can't really help with that outside of trying to safeguard here and there. They do pure shadow damage, and they're just a mess to deal with while the tank already needs to have a lot of attention from the healer. We already saw Long getting quite low in there as he jumped and pulled everything together. Battle for Champion has procced their second Reaping now and combined it with some of the Lashers on the side. Always trying to make as efficient use of it as possible. Bloodstormer Screech going out on the side right now, though.
Yeah, the Screech is one of those things that sometimes just go through because it does interrupt your cast if it goes through, but there's only one healer that can be interrupted, the rest is melee, so it's not a huge deal, but it also does AoE damage. Now there's other casts that are more important to interrupt, and at some point you just don't have any interrupts left for the Screech, so that's why we sometimes see it go through, but it can be dangerous on top of just other damage, especially the Fixate coming through. And Team D just slightly behind compared to Battle for Champ, and you see the Rogue just dropping so low as he does up the Fixate on him, and Loom dying!
If only he had access to that trinket from earlier that he misplayed on the boss, so he goes down. They finally use their battle res, and Team D gets Long back up, but he's not going to have aggro on all of the Reaping that's randomly putting stacks of that Reaping Soul debuff on players. Umunk unfortunately goes down as well. There's a Blood Swarmer running around the side, just meleeing players. Baby Pig gets down to 3%, procs the cheat death and goes down as well. An absolute nightmare here for Team Deplete right now is the version of the team that we're getting as they struggle to stabilize everything. Mogton getting frontal from the Maggot right now, going down. Ab gets Decaying Mind with stuns you until you're healed, and that is all she wrote for Team D as they have a full team wipe. Long doing what he can by popping his shield wall. Avatar comes up as well, looking to desperately try to finish up some of this trash right now. Now he might be able to do it. The Warriors do a lot of damage. The rest of the team that can stealth has released and is trying to get back to them, but Long will be joining them and going 6 feet under right now as they have a full team wipe in Battle for Champion about to proc their third Reaping.
This is such a disaster for Team D. On these pools, if you have any sort of death coming in, everything is just going to fall apart because you're going to miss some interrupts, you're going to have other problems, and the tank dying especially. It's so hard for tanks to get the aggro back if they lose everything from dying. So even if when the Battle Res came up immediately from the Rest Druid, he just had such a hard time getting aggro back, and the damage dealers were just dying over and over because of the aggro. Battle for Champ, on the other hand, having such a clean run, 0 deaths so far, proc the Reaping Wave, and they are on top of Kragmaw now.
Yeah, Kragmaw. Now we're in a tyrannical setting. You know, we always preach how Kragmaw is particularly dangerous during the Tantrum, and that is certainly the case. But just want to make sure that you kill off any trash and remaining residual Reaping mobs that you have before the Tantrum, so that Jack, in this case, on the side of Battle for Champion, can have full focus on just healing the group as they run around stomping the ticks before they spawn into full-fledged mobs. Something that every single one of Kragmaw's 3 main abilities spawns on the ground. Here's the first, not Reaping, but here's the first Tantrum on the side of Battle for Champion. We do get that Tree of Life out, and he's trying to get the team as healthy as possible before they snowball into a full 4 stack of Grievous.
Yeah, Grievous is such a dangerous affix to have here in this boss, especially in a tyrannical setting, because the Tantrum just does so much AoE damage, and once the Tantrum is over, in theory there's no more AoE damage for the group coming in, so in theory you could be focusing on the tank heal, but because of the Grievous you need to make sure everyone gets up to 100% HP to get rid of the Grievous stacks, and then on top of that you also have to deal with the tank just getting so much damage on top of Grievous too, so definitely a very difficult fight to heal for Jack as he just struggles to get rid of this Grievous here.
Yeah, just how much trouble he's having fighting finally got rid of the melee's Grievous by hitting them above that 90% threshold, and then himself. The tank the entire time has been sitting in 4 stacks Grievous just because of the boss melees as well. And by the time he just barely got everybody out of Grievous except for the tank, the Tantrum has now started again. He does not have Tree of Life available this time, but has Tranquility and is popping that quite dangerous low amount of health on the tank right now. Still hasn't broken out of that 4 stack of Grievous, as once again we see support with Ignore Pain coming up in that kind of absorb bubble design on the player's frame right now, just doing what he can to mitigate and help the healer, help him get out of that 4 stack. Team D not giving up, though they have pulled their 3rd Reaping Wave on top of Kragmaw, but are, I mean, just immense amounts of percent behind.
Yeah, definitely. And Battle for Champ has been lucky as well with the ability combination here. Now, in Kragmaw, if you do get the charge right after the Tantrum instead of getting the frontal, then you have a little bit more time in between the Tantrums to actually DPS the boss. So you definitely want that RNG to happen instead of getting the frontal first. So good RNG for Battle for Champion coming in right after this charge. They will get another Tantrum though, and Jack is out of cooldowns at this point. No Trank, no Tree of Life, so let's see if he can manage to keep the group alive here.
We do see the Rogues popping their feint, anything they can to help mitigate some of the damage from the AoE pulses from Kragmaw coming in right now. They do manage to survive, but Jax is going to have his hands full right now trying to get the rest of the team out of Grievous. The boss is certainly not low enough that they could just commit and kill it and have everybody drop a fish feast at the end and get out of that Grievous stack. So he's doing what he can, popping those regrowths and getting a potion here to get some extra mana in so that he can try and finish off the fight. They might have one last Tantrum at the very end of the fight, but they should be able to commit through it and just finish the boss out without having to stomp any of the ticks. Team D trying to hold their ground right now as they're 7 deaths behind, and Kragmaw's only now hitting 55%.
Yeah, interesting that he chose to use his potion here as his Innervate was back up. He just used his Innervate, so in theory he didn't need to use the potion. He could have just went in Catform DPS the boss a little bit, because Innervate was definitely enough. He did not need the extra, but a better safe than sorry, I guess, for Battle for Champion as they down Kragmaw and they're are going to continue to the next trash pack. Now, we've seen these pulls before where you just kind of shroud past the skeletons and then pull the danger noodle on top of some skeleton bags.
Yeah, we are indeed entering the pasta factory here as the team indeed grabs what trash they can. Actually, no, they end up blinding the menacing Macaroni on the side there and move over to the rest of the Guardians. Now, they're probably actually just going to straight up skip that on the side with advantage from the Rogue that blinded, and they're going to pull the Defilers plus Guardians. The Death Speaker has the second blind from the Rogue applied to it, and they actually missed one of the Raised Dead casts, so I saw an extra Guardian just spawn on the side of Battle for Champions, but that is a grievous error right now. So much damage coming in on the Prot Warrior here for Battle for Champion. Does not have his One Zombie's Trinket available. He has his Spell Reflect up right now when he can, but they need to babysit those Defilers. It requires 2 interrupts per, so they had to probably let the Raised Dead cast go through so that they had their interrupts available for the Defilers. So just huge amounts of tank damage coming in. His Team D is now at 22% with Tranquility popped on their respective Tantrum for Kragmaw.
Yeah, his cheat dash trinket is just barely off cooldown, but it was so close of him dying there. We saw the Ring of Peace come out of the Windwalker, definitely saving his life there at the very last second. But having those double Defilers and 1 Death Speaker, definitely very difficult trash bag, especially for the tank, as you can see. And if there's any sort of interrupt that you're missing, that can cause a disaster for your group, as there's Shadow Bolt volleys that need to be interrupted. There's also the Withered Curse, which if it goes through, leaves a debuff behind on everyone, decreasing your HP and decreasing your damage. So you definitely want to interrupt all of those abilities. But Battle for Champion proccing the 80% Reaping Wave and pulling it on top of Sancha. They do not have their Bloodlust available, and this is something that is very difficult. So let's see how they're dealing with this.
Yeah, there's something we see typically from a lot of teams, and Nagura, you know, you mentioned earlier that we do talk to these teams, and one of the hardest pulls they say in this dungeon is actually combining this 4th Reaping Wave with Sancha. It's just very, very dangerous. Fortunately, they've already dealt with the double Defiler, so that's usually what starts to spiral things out of control, and most of the Reaping has been essentially deleted as it came in with max amounts of damage support for AoE coming in from especially the 2 Rogues and the Prot Warrior here are able to get the proper dispels on the tank here from Jack, and everything is nice and stable right now. Sporecaller Sancha is hitting 75%. Second round of upheaval is hitting the melee right now, and the last mushrooms have been shield wall popped here from the Prot Warrior, and we're going to see the first Festering Harvest cast.
Yeah, they just deleted that Reaping Wave. It died so quickly, especially with just this huge AoE damage coming out of the Rogues and the Prot Warrior. So dealing with this Reaping Wave very quickly is so important to give the tank less damage on him, less dots, because this boss alone already does a lot of tank damage if you have the shockwaves constantly coming in. So you definitely got to watch out for tank damage here. Now, his Bamsani trinket, the cheat dash trinket, is available again, so he's one more thing to rescue himself in case something does happen, but you really want to save it for later on.
bit of mismanagement here from Team D that they're trying to just get as close as possible, but they mismanaged their interrupts right off the bat with these 2 Defilers, and we can see that Curse that's just about to expire from the players right now. Withering Curse was allowed to channel for a bit, and every time it stacks, you deal 2% less damage, so somebody mismanaged their kicks there, and they've already fallen a bit behind on Sporecaller Zancha. They're looking to kill their last Defiler and then pull the Death Speaker along with their 4th Reaping Wave on top of Zancha, but they have their work cut out for them as Battle for Champion is now at 39% on Sporecaller Zancha, 0 deaths on the board, and has already dealt with their 4th Reaping.
Yeah, Battle for Champ definitely ahead at this point. Just having such a clean Underrot run so far. 0 deaths coming in, just everything looking so clean and so fast by Battle for Champ. Right after this boss, they still have to deal with 20% trash, and there's going to be one very specific difficult pull where you pull a Danger Noodle on top of some skeletons with a Death Speaker, with a Defiler, and one of those bigger ads that constantly casts Frontal Fear and the Tentacles. So that's one more pull where things can go wrong. We've seen things, we've seen healers die in the past, and then a whole team just having to wipe because of that. So definitely things can go wrong in the future. But let's be honest, Battle for Champ just having such a clean run.
I'm sorry, I was just wiping some drool away from my mouth at the thought of mass failures on that pull. So we'll have to see if Battle for Champion are able to pull it off here. Sporecaller Zancha, 13% right now. And indeed, they will combine a lot of a Death Speaker, likely a Defiler, a Faceless Corruptor, along with one of those Raging Rigatonis and the Guardians on the side with that one Death Speaker. But Team D, a lot of damage going out right now. It seems they didn't soak one of the mushrooms. Trank is trying to save the day right now, but it's just not enough as Baby Pig goes down and Mog procs his cheat death. They do have the Battle Res available and have managed to stabilize right now, but that was certainly a blunder on the side of Team D. It seems like they're just really shaken up right now. They're trying to do what they can to catch up, but all the play is just so sloppy. So an extra death on the board for them. Their last Battle Res has been used, and they're just looking to chew through the remaining half of the boss right now, as Battle for Champion has already pulled all of the Reanimated Guardians and the Death Speaker, the entire mob that I just said, along with this ferocious Fettuccine.
Team D seems like they have Reanimated Guardians here, which they got created by the Death Speaker casting Raise Dead, I'm pretty sure. Which, of course, those Guardians don't give any sort of percentage because it was casted by the Death Speaker. So huge mistakes by Team D, just not interrupting the cast and getting additional assets they're not supposed to be getting. On top of that, just not soaking all the mushrooms, getting debuffs on everybody. And Ab is completely out of mana. 0 mana left for Ab as he sits down to drink to get some mana back to be able to heal the rest of the fight, as the boss is still on 30%. And Battle for Champion doing this difficult pull that I've been talking about earlier, but they're doing it very cleanly.
Yeah, and the problem is with Ab needing to sit down and drink is now he's let everybody snowball into a 4-stack of Grievous, so he's made his job even harder, unfortunately, because of the damage that went out with these mismanaged mushrooms earlier on Sporecaller Zancha. Battle for Champion running down to their final 2 Corruptors. Now, based on the percentage that they have, they should only need to kill one of these Danger Noodles, plus the remaining 5% will come from the 2 Faceless Corruptors, and it will lead them to their last Reaping on top of the boss for what hopefully for them will be an almost, pretty much actually flawless run. 0 deaths on the board. Team D right now having a lot of trouble with Long. Ab is just constantly pouring mana into him right now as another Festering Harvest hits, and Long eats one of the mushrooms as well. Ab is once again completely out of mana, just cannot seem to get Long out of that 4-stack of Grievous, and the rest of the group is starting to ramp up stacks as well, as Upheaval is about to hit them. Sporecaller Zancha at 1% finally goes down, and everybody's emergency going to hit down a Fish Feast and start eating away to heal up and get that mana back.
That was such a... They almost wiped there at the very end for Team D, but they did manage to finish it off. But it's too little too late, as Battle for Champ is already on the way to down those 2 Corruptors here, proccing their 100% Reaping Wave. And now all they need to do is wait until this door opens, then they're going to get teleported down into the last boss room. The whole Reaping is going to teleport on top, and then they're going to pull the boss with their Bloodlust available to them as well. And still, 0 deaths. They have 2 Battle Rests available. There's not that many things that can stop them at this point.
No, absolutely nothing can stop them. They do go downstairs. 5th Reaping Wave has proc. No surprise to see it all mass pulled together along with the Unbound Abomination, final boss of the dungeon, and the Warriors just going insane along. Everybody's going insane right now. Huge amounts of AoE damage coming out of the group as the, once again, the Reaping Wave, just like the 4th Reaping Wave on top of Zancha, gets absolutely deleted from the encounter. They move around together in a nice circular pattern, as always, to make sure that those spores don't become a problem, and they keep aiming the breath in the same direction. At this point, they just need to make sure they keep cleansing their damage over time, accruing stacks on the fight along with the aura given from Titan Keeper Hezrel, and just kind of chew through the boss's energy, really, not his health, to spawn those blood visages.
Yeah, so the energy, instead of HP, you actually increase the energy once you hit the boss, and once it reaches 100 energy, you see the blood visages spawn, as you saw one in the back there, and once 2 of them die, you get rid of the HP of the boss. So in theory, you have to kill 3 times 2 of those blood visages to kill the boss, so 6 6 in total.
My God, I wouldn't have been able to do that math in my head, not in a million years. But 6 it is, as Nagura's called it. 2 of them has been deleted, and 6 minus 2, last I checked, was 4. Jack will have to make sure about that just later. I know you're quite surprised. Battle for Champion, 67% on Unbound Abomination. Team D doing everything they can to try and catch up. They're dealing with their 2 last Corruptors here, but they still need to kill those, proc their Reaping, go downstairs, Bloodlust, combine that with the boss, and somehow beat Battle for Champion by 40 seconds because of the 8 deaths on the board. That is not happening with such a well-trained Battle for Champion team. I mean, Battle for Champion, you know, they've had their hiccups. We saw their kind of motherload issues earlier, but like they just have, when they have clean runs, they have clean runs. I mean, they just destroy this dungeon.
Yeah, most definitely. Battle for Champion just playing so cleanly. And Team D, what do they have to do at this point to get back into the game? Like, I think it's just their mentality just struggling at this point, as they almost lost the game earlier to Black Mamba. So they just need to have a reset, really, and just think about this serious, because Team D has won against Battle for Champion in the past. We know they're a good team, and we know they can do it. they're just not playing up to their game currently.
No, they're not. And maybe they just don't care at this point, because they know they're making land. And who knows what's going on through their minds and in voice comms right now, but nonetheless they are putting up the fight that they need to put halfway through their Bloodlust as they're working on the Unbound Abomination. But as always, as we say here, just too little too late, as Battle for Champion is working towards spawning the final 2 Vestiges, which have spawned on the side, and Titan Keeper Hezro will be deleting those for the players, allowing Battle for Champ to very dominantly take the first map 1-0.
Yeah, Battle for Champion just having such a good game here. 0 dabs and super fast time by
the Confessor and Augur pull. Hopefully the healers do know that they should jump up on the stairwell, but we're going to have to see Nagura. As was mentioned earlier, they don't want to kite too far from the stair area with the Sanguine, because it could actually turn around and smack one of the melee when that Typhoon comes in.
We've actually seen, I think it was either Battle for Champ or Team D that didn't use this snap position in the past, but we see both healers this time around actually using that snap position, so we don't have the Juggernauts use that charge ability. Now, one thing I mentioned before is though that if any of the melees are too far away from the Juggernaut, they might charge to them and just do huge amounts of AoE damage to the melee, so they definitely want to watch out for that one, as we've seen teams wipe to that in the past.
Battle for Champion just absolutely deletes this pack, but that's by virtue of the fact that Team D did not use their heroism here. So Battle for Champion still had about 8 seconds running on that. They run down the stairs right now and are getting ready with the sword pulls. The rogues pre-position themselves with that Tricks of the Trade, as we see the Protware jump into position. No falling off the bridge just yet right now, as Shield Wall is pre-popped before these swords get in. Fortified Swords, of course, doing a fair bit of damage to the tank since they're not allowed to jump away. Does well to move away before the Sanguine starts to hit down. Unfortunately, the Sky Screamer sits there for just a bit, gets a few ticks of the Sanguine, but you know what? That's the gamble you take when you try to do the snapping.
Team D just struggling at the end of this very first pull, as they didn't use their Bloodlust. It took much longer, and then the double Juggernauts were alive. Yumong just dropped low, then he was sitting in the Sanguine and just kind of dying to the Sanguine, and then they struggled to finish up the rest of the mobs, as one of them healed up as well. But now they're finally done with it. They're doing this pull where they pull one of the Sky Screamers and engage the boss. Now, we've seen this go very wrong before, and the boss is also in a very wrong spot as well. He's really, really far away, and they might not be able to pull the boss from over there.
Yeah, well, hopefully it does work out for them. But yeah, Team D, of course, just because they move so much slower, the boss's pathing is just completely off for them, whereas Battle for Champion knew the timing they were getting involved in by having that heroism popped at the beginning of the dungeon. Team D also has that 1 death on the board. They didn't end up using the battle res for it, but they did have that death come over at the end of the trash pack that Nagura mentioned they were struggling with right now. Here comes the rest of the Reaping for Team D right now, is dealing with it, and only now is Razan starting to round the corner on the far side as Ab runs off and tries to tag it for the rest of the group. Here it comes in, but Razan already down to 58% for Battle for Champion.
Yeah, Team D just, because it took them so long to finish up the first pack, the timing was completely off. Razan was in a wrong spot, everything just kind of going wrong for them. His long actually dropped so low as he has to bleed from the boss on top of him, and then people are just getting fear left and right as well. And you see the Sanguine on the floor, the boss is standing so close to the Sanguine.
I just kind of,
yeah, exactly. I want Lung to actually just drag the boss away from this, because this is giving me anxiety.
Well, that's probably why he's keeping it there, Nagura, knowing who stresses you out. You'll just be just as bald as I am by the end of this match. Oh, what a lovely sight that would be, wouldn't it? We'll work on that. Battle for Champion now down to 27, down to 17% on Razan, while getting 27% trash count, because they are pulling the extra Sky Screamers from up top the stairs. One of the melees going and tagging it for the tank. The tank, of course, needs to stay positioned here, otherwise he risks resetting the boss. The boss very easily resets at the base of the stairs there. 4% now on Razan. Battle for Champion just gliding on through this this dungeon right now as they finish off the first boss and immediately mount up, getting ready to move. And you said oof just because the Sanguine. The Sanguine came down perfectly just as the boss died. Excellent calculation there from Battle for Champion.
Yeah, Battle for Champion just playing so well. Zero Devs, of course, doing everything just a little bit faster compared to Team D as they're on their way to do this pretty huge trash pool. Now, you see some of the CC come in here on those honor guards, but they're killing the totem, so that means that they actually want to deal with the honor guard, because you don't have to deal with the totem if you don't want to kill them in the first place. Now, this is different of a pull that we've seen from other teams before. Usually, they just kind of want to ignore the honor guards because they're so difficult to deal with, especially because they do a huge amount of tank damage and a huge amount of AoE.
Yeah, and there's just so much damage coming in on the tank right now. Jack unfortunately started low health as well. I think he ate one of the shield bashes to the face. Certainly ate something to the face because there are a few mobs in here, including the shield bearers and now the honor guard, that if they're not within proximity of the tank when they're casting either their rending tear or their shield bash, they'll just hit one of the closest other proximity targets. In this case, Jack was unfortunately the brunt of that, and he's just not able to heal out of this 4-stack of Grievous along with one of the 2 rogues. The tank's just having so much damage right now and is proccing low. I might have actually procced his cheat death drink. We'll have to see once they get out of this trash bag. Fortunately, did not manage to do that as they start to run off towards Volkal's platform. Team D doing a similar pull here with the honor guard. I'm not really sure what the hype of pulling the honor guard lately is. It's just one of the most dangerous mobs in this dungeon, along with the Colossi on the other side. But nonetheless, these teams are dedicated and married to this idea as Team D hits 27% trash. Battle for Champion has now pulled Volkal along with the second Reaping.
Yeah, so Volkal, they try to shadow melt some of the Reaping mobs off. Usually we see teams just be slightly before the 40% Reaping wave as they engage Volkal. They don't actually trigger it. Usually they trigger the Reaping wave with the next pack and then deal with it with the swords. So interesting route from Battle for Champion, just making sure they have the 40% before this. Now they shadow melted some of them off, but you couldn't really get rid of all of them, so they have to deal with it in phase 1 here. And phase 1 really not that difficult, but there's a lot of AoE damage on everybody and everyone is spread out, so it's a lot more difficult for Jax to heal everybody because they can't stand in the efflorescence. The wild growth might not be hitting everybody because they're so spread out, and this is why the Grievous is stacking up on everybody.
Yeah, the Grievous plus that first disease tick, which is inevitable from Volkal. No matter how quick you interrupt it, you're going to get one of those first 3 stacks of the disease from Volkal's cast. So, of course, only the Monk can really dispel it here and does so on the Prot Warrior just to get a bit of extra safety in. But got a bit scary there for Jack. Indeed, as Nagura mentioned, they did spiral into a 4-stack of Grievous. Managed to mostly get out as Jack is still sitting on that 4-stack at 71%, trying to get back up to 90% so he can just stop focusing on himself and start focusing either on some damage or healing the tank up. But now the rogues are starting to snowball into that same effect. Team D right behind and doing what was mentioned earlier. They actually sit right below the second Reaping pack because it's really just not very efficient to drag Reaping on top of this first boss, on top of the second boss, excuse me, Volkal, as he's just spam healed by the totems in this first phase. So you're really just accruing a ton of dispels from the healer for absolutely no reason.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how they're going to change up their route later on, because they only got 2% more than Team D, but maybe there's actually something they can skip later on that Team D has to play to get this extra percentage. So we will see what happens later, but Battle for Champ about to down Volkal here, and now they want to self-pass these mobs again using their second Shroud, and now it's going to be a double Stalker pull plus a Witch Doctor pull, and this is something that we've seen teams wipe to before because those casters are just so dangerous.
These casters are very dangerous, and there are the stalkers that are, well, fortunately for them, at the bottom of the stairs. They do patrol up and down those stairs, so sometimes it can be quite annoying to find them and just get them in the pack, leave them right away. Here comes the first bulwark of Juju. Shockwave is interrupted, used to interrupt that for a Battle for Champion. They do well there. There are, of course, 2 shield bearers as an intimidating shout comes out from their Prot Warrior to make sure that it interrupts some of the spell casting. He might also be running the Azerite trait that absorbs some of their incoming damage after, so just a bit of defensive there on this, what is usually seen as one of the more difficult pulls in the dungeon from a trash perspective, especially in the fortified environment. 54% now as they well deal with that, and they start to run over to the next sword pack. Rogue's running ahead to Tricks of the Trade onto the tank as he shield wall and snaps it into position. No falling off the bridge yet, but huge amounts of damage coming in on the group right now. Some of the swords get a bit of leap, if I'm not mistaken, on the group as they're trying to get into position. So everybody's quite low. Cheat Death has proc for both rogues as well.
And these double sword pulls are just so dangerous. We've seen teams before, Black Mamba, I believe, completely wiped this one or have the tank going down. We see one of the Skyscreamers getting a cast through because it's just standing there in the back and just not going away. He's standing in this Sanguine, constantly healing up and not being interrupted. Now we finally moved out of the Sanguine, but this is the problem. These are some of the dangerous things when you use these snapping spots, especially if you have Sanguine. Not only does the tank get so much damage, but sometimes the mobs are just standing there healing forever, and it's so hard for the team to get them back out.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the gamble you take with snapping in the first place. It's not exactly the most intended mechanic in the world, but players do take advantage of it, and it is allowed as per the rules here at the dungeon. So any kind of side effect that comes with it is at your own discretion, and didn't work out great for Battle for Champion there, but they did avoid any sort of crisis scenario like a full white as they rear up and pull the next double sword pull right now along with the Skyscreamer, try to get aggro on it, and looks like they're not going to be snapping this one, so they're pulling all the swords together along with their third Reaping Wave, just cleaving them all down, huge amounts of AoE damage. I guess they just felt it didn't need to do it this time because they just had all their cooldowns ready for AoE, as Team D has down Volcall as well, and Long dropping so low right now. He has a Shadow Smash debuff on him as well, as does Ab from the Lost Souls from the Reaping Wave, the second Reaping Wave, and they're just struggling to heal everyone up right now as long as running around in circles. They have managed finally to kill the swords on the side, so most of the danger has been averted as long as the spells come out from Ab during this Reaping Wave, but pretty scary there. And again, they just got hit by one of the Lost Souls trying once again to snap the mobs into locations, so they're going to have 20% reduced max health for the remainder of that minute.
Insane amount of healing coming out of Ab here. As one of the cast goes through from the Skyscreamers, everyone is feared. They need to make sure that everyone survives here, as they're just struggling so much with this pull. But you see almost 50k HPS coming out of Ab here just to make sure everyone is healed, and that was super close by them, as Battle for Champ already on 77%, are dealing with the Spire Gauntlet, hopefully not getting hit by it. And then we will see if they use the Bloodlust or not, because they still have 30 seconds on it, and usually we see teams using Bloodlust for this huge pull in the Priestess Alunza room.
And Long unfortunately procced his Cheat Death Trinket there, but you know, some of the reason why Ab had to do so much healing there was just poor play by the rest of the team, getting hit by Shadow Smashes, Cheat Death proccing left and right, interrupts not happening on the Fears, and Maw goes down here for Team D right now. Second death on the board, immediately one of the battle reses is used so he can help cleave down the rest of this fairly dangerous fortified pack right now, as it is combined with some Skyscreamers on their side. Long does not have access to his Cheat Death Trinket, so they have to make sure to heal him well and just kill this pack before he dies, quite frankly, because it is just almost unhealable amounts of damage coming in. You can see him struggle, just barely yo-yoing between 20 and 40% health, as Ab is doing nothing but pumping regrowths into Long right now, finally managing to stabilize him as the trash does fall. Battle for Champion has already procced their fourth Reaping, combined it with the trash and Priestess Alunza on their side.
This was such a clean pull coming in by Battle for a Champ here, as they pulled this the whole room basically, except this one Augur there in the back, which is sapped, as you can see in the back right corner. But the Battle for a Champion just doing such a clean pull, and everything dying at the very same time. You saw the Ring of Peace come in perfectly. None of the mobs died earlier, because if you kill one mob earlier, you have the Sanguine spawn and mobs are healing. So perfectly controlled AoE damage out of Battle for Champion. Just very clean Sanguine management by them as they pull the boss here, and they only need this Augur that is CC'd in the back for the rest of the percentage, and then they only need the Skyscreamer, which they're most likely going to pull to Yasma.
Yeah, pull, and of course is Paralyze on the side there, and Jack doing an excellent job on damage control right now, getting the Entangle on the first Spirit of Gold. The second one has been paralyzed by their Windwalker, and they're just making sure to constantly tend to the Augur on the side that they will likely pull on top of Priestess Alunza sometime after the second transfusion. A bit late there to grab his Blood Puddle, or I suppose Black Goop Puddle on the ground for the Windwalker, so just a bit of extra damage lost on Priestess Alunza by not getting the first tick with the Reflect on the transfusion, but 10% on the board for her. The Augur has indeed been pulled on top of the boss, well Ring of Peaced out right before it died to make sure that there's no Sanguine healing on the boss, and they'll be moving over to indeed Yasma plus that final Skyscreamer.
Yeah, very clean run. So far they have to finish up to the last percentage. You see one of the rogues already going ahead because you want to trigger the RP to make sure the stairs are available to go to the last boss, Yasma. This is why the rogue is already there and mounted up on the way to go over to the waterfall. Now they need 3%, as we mentioned earlier, which is going to be the last Skyscreamer they're pulling to the last boss room. Now, they will have to succeed in the corner somehow with either Incap by the Windwalker or Hibernate by the Rasta Druid. And then at the very end of the fight, they will make sure they kill the Skyscreamer to not have to deal with the last Reaping Wave.
Yeah, it should be no problem for them. I mean, this is just a flawless run coming out of Battle for Champion here. Both of these games have been absolutely stellar from them. They really just came to play here and claim that first seed and show that they are the best team in the East right now as the team finally moves up and pulls Yasma, the final boss of the dungeon. Bloodlust immediately popped for the team as the Sky Screamer, I don't think has managed to catch up just yet, but I do believe they pulled it. So, yeah, there it is on the side right now. So Paralysis is coming in immediately on it, and they will be spawning their first round of spirits near the boss so that they can easily cleave it down.
Yeah, Team D, I mean, if you look at their deaths, they really only had 2 deaths, so not huge mistakes, but they're still just one whole boss behind at this point. They're still at Priestess Alunsa while Battle for Champ already on Yasma. They also saved their Bloodlust for Yasma at this point, so it's so much cleaner and so much faster by Battle for Champion. Definitely playing really well today, having those clean runs and really fast runs on top of that too. Now on Yasma, there's not that much that can go wrong except the main mechanic, of course, of the boss, which are those spiders, as you can see. Sometimes they will go bigger and activate and they start fixating people, but this is why the boss is being guided kind of in a circle on the edge of the room, because the spiders will constantly follow and just kind of be stacked up. The more stacked the spiders are, the less of a problem they're going to be.
Yeah, so no problem here for Battle for Champion. Now, the other thing, of course, that could go disastrously wrong is spawning the Sanguine from the Sky Screamer under the boss, but they've shown that they can easily handle that mechanic as finally the Sky Screamer is indeed pulled for them. Yasma 35% on the board as Team D is only now running up the hill towards it.
Yeah, Team D actually getting hit by a bunch of spiders as they're walking up the stairs here. It's just not their day, really. Team D have shown in the past they're a world-class team, really, but today they just have those small mistakes over and over, getting hit by things, by spiders as they walk up the stairs. It's really just not their day on Team D side, as Battle for Champ just playing so much clean, and it's really their day today. As you can see, actually everyone dropping is really low because of the Soul Rend, but it shouldn't be a problem for Jack to make sure that all of them are healed up and the Grievous is gone, and it's on their way to win 2-0 against Team D and winning their 3rd cup here.
Yeah, so here they go right now as they look to finish off Yasma and claim a 2-0 victory over Team D, solidifying their place as first seed in the East and really showing that they can hang with the best in the West, as Jack always refers to here. Battle for Champion, an absolutely tremendous and stellar performance here, closing off
their spot as that #1 team going forward with a very huge amount of points at their disposal. From this, they do gain 140 points and very much, as we've mentioned before, solidified that spot as the #1 seed for the East, but they will be the #2 seed overall for this. So a company, Big Money Crab, getting those 40 points at the bottom, but Black Mamba, Buff War, Nerf Rogue 80-60, Battle for Champion 140, and Team D 100 here. So adding that to our regular prize pool, we get to see at the top 4 in gold for each region. Method EU, Method NA, Abracadabra 40K, top 4 for the West. For the East, we've got Battle for Champion, Team D, Buff War, and Black Mamba here on this one. So these teams are going to be the representatives for the LAN going forward on this one. And at this point, Nagura, very exciting to see that we finally know who